Here's the thing about rap. You can go from pulling up in Lambos to owing the IRS millions faster than a hit record drops off the charts. And it happens more than people realize, fam. We're talking artists who are moving serious weight in the industry, selling out arenas, copping mansions, signing multi-million-dollar deals. And somehow, some way, the money just vanished. No cap. The music industry is one of the most dangerous places to build wealth. Between bad management, lawsuits, label deals that bleed you dry, lifestyle inflation, and just straight up living above your means. Even the biggest names aren't safe. And in 2026, we're seeing it play out in real time with some rappers you would have never expected to be in this position. Think about it for a second. These are guys who had accountants, financial advisors, business managers, whole teams of people whose only job was to protect the bag, and they still ended up in the red. So what does that tell you? It tells you that when the money comes fast and the lifestyle hits hard, it doesn't matter how big your team is, if the foundation isn't right, it all crumbles eventually. And that's exactly what we're watching happen right now. We're talking household names. We're talking legends of the game. People who had more money than most of us will ever see in a lifetime and still couldn't hold on to it. Some of these situations involved lawsuits that wiped out entire fortunes. Some involved label deals that were basically legal robbery from day one. And some of these rappers just flat out spent money like it was never gonna stop coming. And now reality is hitting them hard, gang. What's wild is that a lot of these artists were literally preaching about wealth and financial power in their music. Talking about investing, talking about ownership, talking about generational wealth. And behind closed doors, the picture looked completely different. That's the part that's going to surprise you most about this list. Because we're not talking about underground artists or one-hit wonders here. We are talking about rappers who were at the very top of this game. Award winners, platinum sellers, guys with clothing lines, restaurant chains, and real estate portfolios. And in 2026, a whole lot of that is either gone or on the verge of disappearing. Some of these stories are honestly sad when you really sit with them. Years of grinding, building a name from nothing, reaching the top, and then watching it all fall apart because of decisions that could have been avoided. Y'all are gonna be shaking your heads at some of these for real. So if you're ready to find out who's really struggling behind the flashy Instagram posts and the designer fits, stay locked in, because this list is about to go crazy. Starting things off with Rick Ross, because when you think of rap and wealth, Rose's name is literally one of the first ones that comes to mind. The man built an entire brand around being the boss. Private jets, Wingstop franchises, a 235-acre estate in Georgia that used to belong to Evander Holyfield. Everything about Rick Ross screamed untouchable money. But lately, the cracks in that empire are starting to show in ways that are hard to ignore. We're talking legal troubles, financial disputes, and a lifestyle that even his income might not be able to sustain anymore. What's going on behind the scenes with Rose is something his biggest fans need to hear, because the reality is a long way from the image he's been selling us for years. Rick Ross, the man who spent the better part of 2 decades telling everybody on planet Earth how rich he was, how many cars he had, how many mansions he owned, how many wings were on his private jet. The man who built an entire rap career, an entire persona, on the foundation of being untouchably wealthy. That same man just got caught flying economy class. Oh my God. Let that land for a second. Rick Ross, economy class, middle seat energy, tray table down. No cap. The internet absolutely lost its mind when those photos hit. And we're going to get into every single detail of that situation and his response, which, I'm not even lying to you, might be the funniest thing I've heard in years. But that's not even the full story. Because on top of getting caught in economy, his concert tickets are not selling. And I do not mean they are selling slowly. I mean they ran a buy one get one free promotion, and people still were not buying. Think about that for a second. They are literally giving tickets away, and fans are still saying no thank you. This is where it gets insane, fam. Because this is a man who was genuinely worth $100 million at his peak. $100 million. And somehow, some way, the biggest boss has gone from living at the absolute top of the rap game to catching flights in row 27 and begging fans to come to his shows with discount codes. How does that happen? Where did the money go? And what does it tell us about everything Rick Ross has been selling us for the last 20 years? Y'all are not ready for this breakdown. Let's get into it right now. All right, so first things first, let me break down what Rick Ross was actually worth at his peak, because you need to understand the height of this before you can fully appreciate how far the fall has gone. At the top of his run, we are talking roughly around 2012 to 2016. Rick Ross had accumulated a net worth that multiple outlets estimated at somewhere between $75 million and $100 million. Now understand what that number actually represents. That is not just rap money, that is diversified, stacked, coming from multiple directions at the same time kind of money. His Maybach Music Group label was genuinely one of the most important imprints in hip-hop at that time. He had signed Meek Mill, Whale, Gunplay, and a roster of artists that were generating real cultural momentum and real revenue. The label deal he had with Warner Brothers was serious money on the business side. He had a Def Jam deal before that, which paid him well. His albums were moving units and generating streaming income. His touring income was substantial because people actually wanted to be in the building when Rick Ross performed. But it was not just music. Ross had a Wingstop franchise portfolio that he talked about constantly. And honestly, the Wingstop thing was a genuinely smart business move. At one point, he had reportedly over 24 Wingstop locations, and when Wingstop was growing the way it was growing, those franchises were printing money. He had real business infrastructure. He had endorsement deals. He had the Belaire Champagne partnership that generated real revenue and real visibility. And then there was the most famous symbol of all his wealth, the Promised Land, his mansion in Fayetteville, Georgia. Bro, this is not a house. This is a compound. 109 rooms, the largest swimming pool in the state of Georgia, its own go-kart track, dozens of acres of land, a property that has been valued at somewhere around $10 million and that Ross purchased for roughly $2 million in 2010, making it one of the genuinely smart real estate moves of his career. So at the peak, the picture looked like this: successful record label, multiple business ventures, Wingstop empire, a legendary mansion, touring income, endorsement money. Rick Ross was legitimately wealthy. The boss persona was backed at least partially by real numbers. So what happened? This is where it gets crazy. Let me break it down for y'all, because the story of how Rick Ross went from $100 million to the situation he is in right now is really a story about one thing above everything else: spending money to make other people feel small. No cap, Ross's entire financial philosophy for the better part of his career was not about building. It was about flexing. And there is a massive, massive difference between those two things. Building means you are using your resources to create systems that generate more resources. Flexing means you are using your resources to impress people who are not paying your bills. Rick Ross chose flexing loudly, repeatedly, and at enormous personal financial cost. Let's talk about the cars first, because this is one of the most documented areas of his spending. At various points, Ross has owned a collection of vehicles that includes multiple Rolls Royces, multiple Bentleys, a Lamborghini custom lowriders, and a range of other vehicles that each individually cost more than most people's houses. We are not talking about one or two nice cars for personal enjoyment. We are talking about an armada of vehicles accumulated specifically to be seen, specifically to be photographed, specifically to send a message to anyone watching that this man had more money than he knew what to do with. The jewelry situation is similarly wild. Ross has spent millions, and I mean that literally, on jewelry throughout his career. Custom chains, diamond-encrusted pieces, watches that cost more than most people's annual salaries. He wore it all constantly, documented all of it publicly, and made sure that everyone in his orbit understood at all times that he was operating at a different financial level than everyone else. But here is where the spending went from excessive to genuinely reckless: the lifestyle maintenance. Having a 109-room mansion sounds like an asset until you realize what it costs to maintain it. Staff, utilities, security. Upkeep on a property of that size is not cheap. It is not even kind of cheap. People close to the situation have suggested that maintaining the Promised Land alone was costing significant money every single month. Money that was going out the door whether Ross was generating income or not. Add the private jet usage, the entourage costs, the constant travel, the recording costs, the label expenses, and you start to see a situation where the outflows were massive and the inflows, while once significant, were not keeping pace. That's actually crazy to think about when you lay it all out. $100 million and it was not enough to sustain the lifestyle he built, because the lifestyle was never designed to be sustainable. It was designed to be impressive. And yo, let's talk about the flexing specifically, because this is a core part of who Rick Ross built himself to be. And understanding it explains a lot about why his public image is taking the hits it is taking right now. Ross did not just flex on people in a general way. He was specific about it, deliberate about it. There is a long documented history of Ross using his wealth as a weapon to mock people who had less. His whole persona was built on making regular people feel like they were beneath him. The biggest boss energy was not just confidence, it was contempt. There was always this undercurrent in his music, his interviews, his social media presence that communicated a very clear message. I have money and you do not, and that makes me better than you. Y'all seeing this pattern, right? Because this matters for what comes next. When you build your entire identity on being richer than everyone around you, when you spend years looking down at people who fly commercial, people who cannot afford what you can afford, people who are not operating at your alleged financial level, and then you get caught in that same economy cabin that you spent years treating as a symbol of not being successful enough. The fall is not just financial, it is symbolic. It is the exact kind of poetic justice that the internet was not going to let slide quietly, and it did not. Okay, so let's get into the economy class situation specifically because, bro, I'm not even lying, this is one of the wildest celebrity moments of the year, and it deserves its full flowers. Photos and footage emerged of Rick Ross, the biggest boss himself, the man who has dedicated roughly 20 years of his public life to communicating that he moves exclusively in private aviation and first-class luxury. Sitting in a commercial economy seat, regular row, flying with regular people like a regular human being who does not own multiple private jets and a 109-room mansion. Oh my God, the internet went absolutely nuclear, and rightfully so. Because this was not just a funny photo, this was a direct contradiction of the brand. This was the physical, visual, undeniable collapse of the image Ross has been selling people since he first started rapping about Maybachs and private planes. Fans were not just laughing, they were doing something more significant. They were connecting dots. They were looking at the economy seat photo and then looking at everything else happening around Ross right now and saying, wait a minute, is the biggest boss actually broke? So what was Ross's response? And this is where it gets good, gang. This is where it gets really good. Ross came out and said, wait for it, that he was flying commercial because his private jet was getting Starlink installed on it. I kid you not. His jet was getting Starlink put on it. That was the explanation. The Wi-Fi upgrade explanation. He needed satellite internet on his aircraft, so he hopped on a commercial flight in economy while the work was being done. Bro, let me count the ways this does not hold up for even 30 seconds of actual examination. First of all, if your jet is in the shop for any reason, what do? You charter another jet. That is what people with actual private jet money do. You pick up the phone, you call a charter company, you pay for a one-way flight on somebody else's aircraft, and you arrive at your destination without ever touching a commercial gate. This is not a complicated process. Charter flights exist specifically for this situation. And at the financial level Ross has always claimed to operate at, chartering a jet for a single flight is not even a meaningful expense. It is a rounding error. Second, even if for some reason chartering was not an option, which it absolutely is, you go first class. You go business class. You do not end up in economy on a commercial flight unless something is wrong that goes well beyond the Starlink installation. And the fans knew it. No cap, the reaction to his explanation was almost as funny as the original photos. People were not buying it at all. The comments were merciless. Everybody could see exactly what was happening. Ross got caught in a situation that contradicted his entire persona and reached for the first explanation that came to mind. And the explanation was so transparently constructed, delivered with so much forced confidence, that it actually made the whole thing worse. What really got people going was the energy behind the response. He did not come back with a laugh and own it. He did not play it off with humor. He came back hard, defensive, trying to make the Starlink story sound not just believable, but almost flex-worthy. Like getting internet put on your jet is itself a status symbol that proves how baller you are. And the harder he pushed the explanation, the less believable it got. Because real billionaire energy does not need to explain the economy seat. Real money just buys another plane ticket and moves on. The defensiveness was the tell. That is actually crazy to watch in real time. But wait, because the economy seat situation is not even the most damaging thing happening to Rick Ross's image and financial reputation right now. The ticket sales are. And this is where it gets genuinely insane. Rick Ross has been doing a tour, and the ticket sales have been, to be extremely generous, not great. We are talking about a situation where venues are not filling up, where the demand for Ross live in concert in 2024 and 2025 is a fraction of what it was at the peak of his career. And at one point, and this is real, this actually happened, his team ran a buy one, get one free promotion on the tickets. Y'all are not ready for how bad that looks for someone with Ross's history and persona. Buy one, get one free on Rick Ross tickets, the biggest boss, the man who made a career out of telling people he does not negotiate, he does not discount, he does not come to where he is. The man whose entire brand is built on exclusivity and excess, and the idea that Rick Ross is a premium product that people should be grateful to have access to. Running a 2-for-1 deal on your concert tickets is the live event equivalent of a luxury car dealership putting a going out of business banner in the window. It is the kind of move you make when you need bodies and seats so badly that the financial logic of the discount outweighs the reputational cost of being seen as a product people do not want to pay for. And here's the kicker. Even after the buy one, get one free promotion, tickets were still not moving the way they needed to move. People were looking at a deal that gave them 2 tickets for the price of 1 and still deciding that the price of 1 was too much for what they were getting. Let me break down for y'all why this is happening, because it is not just one thing. It is a combination of factors that have been building for a while. First, the cultural relevance situation. No cap, Rick Ross is not the center of hip-hop conversation the way he was in 2012. The game has moved. The artists who are dominating right now are a generation removed from Ross's peak moment. His core audience has aged. The younger listeners who are buying concert tickets and filling venues are not necessarily riding for Ross the way his original fan base did. That is just the reality of the music industry. Relevance has a shelf life, and maintaining it requires constant reinvention that Ross has not fully executed. Second, the persona problem. When the thing you are famous for is being rich and powerful and untouchable, and then reality starts poking holes in that image, the economy seat, the ticket discounts, the business moves that have not worked out the way they were supposed to, the audience starts to disconnect. The Ross experience was never just about the music. It was about buying into the fantasy that he was selling. And when the fantasy starts to crack, the purchase becomes less appealing. Third, and this one is real talk important, the relationship between Ross and his audience has always been transactional in a specific way. He was not an artist who built deep personal connections with fans through vulnerability or storytelling in the way some artists do. The connection was built on spectacle, on the image, on the idea of him. And spectacle is the most fragile kind of audience relationship there is, because the moment the spectacle stops working, there is nothing underneath it holding people there. So get this, because we need to talk about the businesses, because the Wingstop situation specifically is something that tells you a lot about the larger financial picture. At its peak, Ross's Wingstop franchise portfolio was one of the genuinely smart parts of his financial story. Franchises and growing chains can be incredibly lucrative when the corporate brand is expanding and the locations are well managed. And for a while, Ross's Wingstop investment looked like exactly the kind of smart money move that rappers do not usually make. But here is where it gets crazy. Running a franchise portfolio is not passive income. It requires management, oversight, attention, reinvestment. Franchise businesses can go sideways for a lot of reasons. Location performance, management issues, corporate brand challenges, economic conditions affecting consumer spending. And when you are a celebrity with 100 other things demanding your attention, and your primary skill set is making music rather than operating food service businesses, maintaining a large franchise portfolio at a high level is genuinely difficult. Reports suggesting that Ross's Wingstop business has faced significant challenges in recent years. Combined with the broader picture of his financial situation, paint a story of business infrastructure that was not maintained the way it needed to be. The passive income stream that was supposed to be generating wealth in the background while he toured and recorded has not been the financial cushion it once was. And when the business income drops at the same time as the touring income drops at the same time as the music streaming revenue is a fraction of what album sales used to generate, that is when the mask starts to look very different from the biggest boss image that Ross has been projecting. No cap, the combination of high fixed costs, the mansion maintenance, the lifestyle overhead, the entourage costs, with declining income across multiple channels is a financial equation that only goes one direction. And that direction is exactly where we are seeing Rick Ross right now. Build up moment gang, because I want to make sure we are connecting all of this to the bigger picture, because what is happening with Rick Ross is not just a celebrity gossip story. It is a cautionary tale about the difference between wealth and the performance of wealth. Real wealth is quiet. Real wealth does not need to announce itself every day on social media. Real wealth does not require an audience. Real wealth is the kind of financial foundation that continues to work for you whether you are famous or not, whether you are relevant or not, whether the public is paying attention to you or not. What Rick Ross built was not that. What Rick Ross built was a spectacle, a performance of wealth that required constant maintenance, constant feeding, constant public participation to sustain itself. Every car purchase, every jewelry acquisition, every private jet post, every mansion photo, none of it was building anything. It was all spending. It was all burning. It was a bonfire of resources designed to create a specific impression in the minds of people who were watching from the outside. And for a while, a genuinely long while, it worked. The performance was convincing enough, the music was good enough, the business moves were generating enough real income that the spectacle could sustain itself. But spectacles are expensive. And when the income starts to slow, the spectacle starts to reveal itself for what it always was. The economy seat is not just a funny photo. It is the moment when the curtain slipped. It is the moment when the performance of wealth and the reality of the financial situation became visibly different in a way that the public could not miss.
For the ones who want to know where my jet at, I obviously didn't get the memo. It's being updated with Starlink.
And Ross's response, the defensive over-explanation, the Starlink story delivered with too much force, made it worse because it confirmed what people were already sensing, that something is not adding up. That is actually insane when you think about where this man started. Let me bring it all the way home, gang, because there's a final piece of this story that ties everything together. Rick Ross at his peak was genuinely inspiring to a lot of people. Whether you loved his music or not, the idea of a kid from Carroll City, Miami, who clawed his way into the music industry and built real financial infrastructure around his career, that was a real story with real elements worth respecting. The Wingstop moves, the label building, the real estate. There was a version of Rick Ross that was actually doing it the right way. But that version got buried under the version that needed to mock regular people for flying commercial. That version got buried under the version that spent millions on things designed exclusively to make other people feel small. That version got buried under years of financial decisions that prioritized image over infrastructure. And now, with the economy seat photos circulating, the concert tickets sitting unsold even after buy one get one promotions, the business is not performing the way they need to. The overall financial picture looking nothing like the biggest boss image. All of those chickens are coming home to roost simultaneously. What if I told you that the greatest casualty of Rick Ross's obsession with flexing on people was not his money, it was his credibility, because money can potentially be rebuilt. Credibility, once the audience decides they are no longer buying what you are selling, is a much harder thing to recover. The fans who are laughing at the economy seat photos are not just laughing at a funny situation. They are laughing at the collapse of a character. They are laughing at 20 years of being told how rich and powerful and untouchable this man was, and now watching reality tell a completely different story. I'm not even lying. This might be the most complete example I have ever seen of what happens when the performance of wealth costs more than actual wealth can sustain. Rick Ross did not just blow $100 million. He spent $100 million trying to convince people he had $100 million. And at some point, the budget for the performance exceeded the budget for everything else. The Biggest Boss, economy class, row 27, tray table down. Bro, that's actually insane. What do y'all think? Is there any coming back from this for Ross? Or is the Biggest Boss era officially over? Drop it in the comments right now because I want to see what the gang is thinking. And if you want more content like this, hit that subscribe button because we got way more of these coming. and y'all are not going to want to miss what drops next. I'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace.
And new at midday, court documents show Memphis rapper Finesse 2 Times and his girlfriend Sugar were both arrested in Texas. Here's a look at their mugshots. Finesse 2 Times' legal name is Ricky Hampton. He faces possession charges for substances, including marijuana.
When you name yourself Finesse 2 Times, the universe has a twisted sense of humor because eventually life starts finessing you right back. And that's exactly what's happening to one of Memphis's hottest exports right now. At just 33 years old, this man went from viral sensation to courtroom defendant.
The rapper who performed at the nightclub in Little Rock, Arkansas Saturday morning was arrested on unrelated charges in this mass shooting that happened there. Ricky Hampton of Memphis, Tennessee, was taken into custody on a fugitive warrant out of Forest City, Arkansas. But so far, no arrests have been made in the shooting at the Power Ultra Lounge.
From packed arenas to nobody picking up the phone when his team calls to book a show. And just when you thought things couldn't get any worse for him, he just lost a six-figure lawsuit to a promoter he tried to run game on. 6 figures. Gone. Money he doesn't even have. This is the story of how a man who built his whole brand around the finesse game got finessed by life itself. And trust me, it's more tragic than anything you've seen on his Instagram. Now, before we get into all of that, we gotta understand who Finesse 2 Times actually is. Because if you only know him from the internet clips and the viral moments, you're missing a much bigger picture. This isn't just a rapper who fell off. This is a man whose whole life has been one long, painful uphill climb against the streets, against the system, against the industry, and now against the courts. And at 33, he's fighting all of those battles simultaneously with no safety net underneath him. No cap, when you lay it all out chronologically and see how every chapter connects to the next, it hits completely different. Because this could have gone so many other ways, but here's what really went down. Let's rewind all the way back to Memphis, Tennessee. If you know anything about Memphis, you already know it ain't for the soft. This is a city that's produced some of the most raw, unfiltered, authentic voices in the history of hip-hop. 3 6 Mafia built an entire subgenre out of that city's energy. Young Dolph turned street credibility into a business empire before his life was tragically cut short. Yo Gotti built one of the most consistent careers in rap by never pretending to be anything other than exactly where he came from. Memphis has always operated on its own frequency, its own tempo, its own code. And Finesse 2 Times, born Ricky Hampton, came up in that exact environment. He wasn't performing in school talent shows dreaming about a record deal. He wasn't the kid in the suburbs who discovered rap through YouTube and decided he wanted to be famous. He was living the life that he would eventually rap about, and that's both the thing that made his music so undeniably real and the thing that kept pulling him back into situations that had nothing to do with music. There's a tension that a lot of Memphis artists carry between the world that made them and the world they're trying to build through their art. That tension is what makes the music authentic, but it's also what makes the journey so treacherous. Growing up in Memphis, Ricky Hampton saw everything the streets had to offer, and not the glamorized version, the real version. The version where the consequences aren't a punchline or a flex. There's something you carry with you every single day. The kind of environment where the pressure on a young man to make money by any means available isn't some abstract concept, it's the actual reality of survival. That shaped him in ways that no amount of success was ever going to fully undo. But it also gave him a perspective that you cannot buy and cannot fake. When Finesse rapped about the street life, he wasn't pulling from imagination or other people's stories. He was pulling from his own chest. And listeners feel that difference immediately, even if they can't always articulate why. Now here's something people don't talk about enough when it comes to Finesse 2 Times. The music didn't come easy, and the come up wasn't overnight. This wasn't a situation where he posted one song on SoundCloud and woke up famous. He was putting in years of work behind the scenes before the general public ever heard his name, recording in whatever studio time he could access, building a local reputation show by show, getting the city behind him the hard way, by consistently showing up and delivering, by being visible in the culture, by letting the music speak for itself without a machine behind it pushing it forward. Memphis is one of those places where the local cosign matters more than almost anywhere else. The city has a long memory and a sharp eye for authenticity. You cannot fake your way into real Memphis love. The people there will check you on it publicly and without apology. So when Finesse started getting that organic city support, when the local tastemakers started putting him on, when his name started coming up in conversations about who was really keeping the Memphis tradition alive, that was earned. That wasn't manufactured. And earned credibility in Memphis travels. It crosses into other southern markets. It gets the attention of blogs and curators who know that Memphis artists don't get put on unless they're legitimate. His style was undeniable too. That Memphis cadence, the slow rolling delivery that somehow still hits with impact, the storytelling that puts you directly in the scene rather than just describing it from the outside. The kind of music that sounds like it was made specifically for late nights when the weight of the world is sitting on your shoulders. That's not a style you can learn from watching other people. That's a style that comes from living a specific kind of life in a specific kind of place. And Finesse had it naturally. He could paint a picture with words. He could make you feel the texture of the environment he was describing. In a music landscape flooded with artists chasing whatever trend is currently dominating the charts, that kind of rootedness stands out like a signal in static. The records started connecting, first locally, then regionally, then the algorithm started doing what it does when the engagement is real. It found new audiences who had never engaged with Memphis rap outside of the classics their older relatives played. And those new audiences connected immediately because the music didn't need translation. Struggle translates, authenticity translates, and Finesse 2 Times was rapping about both with a specificity that made everything feel lived in, because it absolutely was. But here's where it gets crazy, because just as the music was starting to gain that real national traction, life kept throwing them curveballs, and not the kind you can dodge by being smart or being careful. The kind that come from a past that doesn't let go easily. See, here's the thing about Finesse 2 Times that separates his story from a standard rapper gets famous narrative. This man was in and out of jail before most people outside of Memphis even knew his name. And we're not talking about one arrest, one situation that got blown out of proportion by media coverage. We're talking about a recurring cycle, multiple stints, a pattern that kept interrupting his trajectory at the worst possible moments, right when the momentum was building, right when the opportunities were starting to materialize into something real and tangible. He called cases, multiple drug charges, weapons charges, the kind of legal situations that come with living too close to the streets for too long. And each time he went away, the damage wasn't just the time lost sitting in a cell, it was everything that unraveled around him while he was gone. Think about what actually happens to an independent artist's career when they go silent for months at a stretch. The fans who were just discovering him migrate to whoever dropped something new that week. The playlist placements evaporate because the algorithm needs a steady flow of new content to justify keeping someone visible. The potential collaborations that were being discussed informally die quietly, because nobody is going to wait indefinitely for an artist who isn't available. The A&R conversations that were starting to gain traction get shelved because labels cannot invest in an artist whose availability they can't count on. Every single arrest wasn't just a pause button on his career. It was a reset button that dropped him further back than where he started each time. And the cruel irony is that the talent never went anywhere. Every time Finesse 2 Times came home, the ability was still intact. The voice was still there. The pen was still sharp. The charisma that made people lean forward when he performed was still fully present. But the industry doesn't wait for talent. The industry follows momentum. And momentum, once broken that many times, is genuinely difficult to rebuild without serious resources and the right people in your corner. Every time Finesse came home from a bid, he wasn't just returning to where he left off. He was returning to a music industry that had moved a full season forward without him. Trends had shifted. The artists who were up and coming when he went in were now established. The playlist that had started featuring his music had moved on. The conversations about who was next out of Memphis now included names that weren't in those discussions when he went away. And he had to figure out how to re-enter that landscape without looking like he was chasing it. Because nothing kills a street rapper's credibility faster than visibly trying too hard to stay relevant. That tightrope walk, staying authentic to who you are while also adapting enough to remain current, is one of the hardest things any artist can manage in this era. And doing it repeatedly, after multiple stints with no consistent team around you to strategize the returns, is nearly impossible to execute cleanly. The inconsistency that his arrest record forced on his career is something that most industry observers dramatically underestimate when they try to assess why he isn't further along than his talent should have taken him. And then there's the emotional dimension that rarely makes it into these conversations. Imagine building something from scratch, watching it grow, getting close enough to touch the version of success you've been working towards your whole life, and then having it interrupted, then rebuilding, getting close again, and having it interrupted again. At some point, that cycle stops just being frustrating and starts becoming something that affects how you see yourself, how you see the future, how much you're willing to trust that the work you're putting in right now is actually going to lead somewhere stable. That psychological erosion is real. It doesn't show up on a streaming chart, it doesn't show up in a booking report, but it absolutely shows up in the decisions a person makes when they're operating from a place of accumulated defeat. But then, and this is where the story shifts, Finesse 2 Times finally got his moment. His real, undeniable, cannot scroll past this moment. Songs started connecting in a way that went beyond Memphis, beyond the South, beyond the usual regional borders that contain most street rap artists. The internet caught on in a way that changes things permanently. Clips started going viral. Comment sections started filling up with people who had never heard of him 3 months prior, acting like they'd been rocking with him for years. The energy was there. The charisma translated through a phone screen. And for the first time, everything he'd been building through all the setbacks and restarts felt like it was about to pay off at the scale it always deserved. That kind of buzz catches specific attention, and it caught the attention of someone very specific. J. Prince, Rap-A-Lot Records, Mob Ties. If you know anything about the real history of hip-hop, not the surface level stuff, but the behind the scenes infrastructure that actually made the culture what it is, you know exactly who J. Prince is. This is a man who helped architect the careers of Scarface, UGK, Bun B, and a roster of artists who defined an entire era of Southern rap. A man whose influence in both the music industry and the streets runs so deep that his name alone opens doors that most people in this business will never even get close to. When J. Prince puts his stamp on you, it carries a weight that goes beyond any record deal. It's a statement about who you are and where you belong in the hierarchy of this culture. And you have to understand what that moment must have meant for Finesse 2 Times specifically. Here's a man who came from nothing, who fought through years of grinding with no major support, who went in and out of jail and rebuilt from scratch multiple times, who never had the industry infrastructure that artists from more privileged backgrounds take for granted. And now one of the most legendary and powerful figures in the history of street music is saying he sees something worth investing in. That's not just a business transaction, that's validation at the deepest, most personal level. Of course you're signing. Of course the excitement in that moment drowns out the voice that would normally tell you to slow down, get a lawyer, read every single line. You're not thinking about revenue splits and exit clauses. You're thinking about what this cosign changes for your career and your family. The deal that Finesse 2 Times signed with Mob Ties was reportedly a 360 deal. For anybody who doesn't know what that means in practice, let me break it down properly. A standard recording contract is already a significant commitment. The label takes a percentage of your music revenue in exchange for funding your recording, handling distribution, and putting marketing resources behind your releases. A 360 deal rewrites that arrangement entirely. In a 360 deal, the label's financial interest extends to every single revenue stream an artist generates, not just the music, but touring income, merchandise sales, brand endorsements, acting work, appearances, sponsorships. Every dollar that flows through the artist's career in any form, the label has a contractual claim on a percentage of it. Labels justify 360 deals by arguing that their investment in developing an artist creates value across all those revenue streams. Technically, that argument has some logic, but the reality for artists who sign these deals without fully understanding the terms is that they can be generating what looks like significant revenue from the outside while actually keeping a fraction of it themselves. You can have songs with millions of streams and sold out show dates and still be struggling financially because the structure of what you signed means most of that money was already spoken for before it reached a bank account. Which brings us back to the timing of that deal, because it matters. Finesse came into that negotiation at a moment when he finally had the buzz, but when his history had also left him financially behind where he should have been. He didn't have savings built up from the earlier years because those years kept getting interrupted. He didn't have a management team with enough leverage to push back on unfavorable terms. He had momentum, a hot name, and real need. That combination of excitement and financial pressure is exactly how artists end up agreeing to terms that are calmer, more secure version of themselves would have walked away from. The 360 deal became a ceiling on everything he could build. When the checks started coming in and the math didn't add up to what he expected, the motivation to keep grinding within those constraints naturally eroded. Why pour everything into a rollout when the financial return gets filtered through a structure that wasn't built in your favor? That's not laziness. That's a rational response to a situation that doesn't reward effort the way effort deserves to be rewarded. And that response, that slow withdrawal of full investment, is what produced the slowing releases, the reduced promotional activity, and the booking situation that followed. The shows started drying up. Not all at once. That's not how this works. It was gradual, like a slow leak you don't notice until the tire is flat. The headlining slots at venues with real capacity got replaced with supporting roles at smaller events. The fees dropped, then certain markets stopped calling altogether. Promoters run numbers before they book anyone, and when an artist's social media engagement starts plateauing, when new music rollouts slow down, when legal headlines keep attaching themselves to his name in search results, the risk calculation changes. Promoters start choosing the safer option even if the talent isn't comparable. The compounding effect of all of it created a scenario where the infrastructure of his career was quietly deteriorating even while he was still culturally relevant enough that people assumed everything was fine. And that gap between public perception and private reality is one of the most painful places to exist as an artist. Everyone on the outside sees the clout. Only you know that the clout isn't converting into stability the way it should be. Here's where things get real wild. And this is the chapter that went public in the worst possible way. A promoter came through with a booking, negotiated terms, paid money to bring Finesse 2 times in to headline an event. Standard transaction, you agree on a fee, the promoter builds marketing and ticket sales around your name, you show up, perform, everyone gets what they came for. Except it didn't work that way. What allegedly happened was that Finesse 2 times collected the booking money and then didn't show up. But this wasn't a standard no-show. The situation reportedly involved sending his brother to the event in his place. His brother, not the artist whose name was on every flyer, whose face was in every promotional post, whose draw was the entire reason people bought tickets. Think about every person whose night was affected by that decision. The fans who showed up specifically for Finesse, the promoter who had money tied up in every aspect of production, all of it built on a foundation that someone decided to pull out from under everybody. The promoter lawyered up and filed suit. The damages they sought reflected the full scope of the fallout, not just the booking fee, but the marketing costs, the ticket refund liability, the lost projected revenue, and the reputational damage that comes with having your event implode publicly in your market. Independent promoters don't have corporate balance sheets to absorb losses like that. The court sided with the promoter, 6-figure judgment against Finesse 2 times on the record, public, permanent, and he cannot pay it. The music revenue after Mob Ties takes their percentage isn't generating that cash flow. The bookings have slowed to the point where show money isn't filling the gap, and that judgment is sitting there accruing interest capable of intercepting any meaningful income the moment his revenue picks back up. It's a trap that closes tighter the longer it goes unresolved. At 33 years old, that is the weight Ricky Hampton is carrying. Multiple chapters of legal history, a record deal that limits what he can actually build from his own music, a booking market that has cooled significantly, and a 6-figure civil judgment on top of all of it. People online say he brought it on himself, and the accountability is real. The promoter situation was a choice with real victims, and the court made that clear. But if that's where the analysis stops, you're missing the larger story about what this industry does to artists who enter it without protection. There is a direct line between signing a 360 deal you didn't fully understand and eventually making a desperate financial decision. There is a direct line between having your career interrupted by jail multiple times with no infrastructure to preserve what you built and reaching a point where your judgment is compromised by pressure. These aren't excuses, they're context. The music industry has always been structured to benefit the people who already have leverage over the people coming in with nothing but talent. The Mob Ties contract is enforceable. The court judgment is valid. All of it is above board. None of it was designed with Ricky Hampton's long-term interests as the priority. That's the real tragedy. Not just the lawsuit, not just the contract. The tragedy is that a genuinely talented artist from one of the most culturally significant cities in hip-hop history had every tool he needed to build something lasting, and the system around him made sure those tools were always slightly out of reach at the moments that mattered most. At 33 years old, this story isn't finished. People have come back from worse, but the road back is narrow and it requires resources and support that he's going to have to fight hard to build. The talent is still there. Memphis gave him that and nobody can take it back. The question is whether everything else can finally align in a way that lets that talent breathe and become the foundation for something real and lasting. Right now, that question doesn't have a clear answer. And that uncertainty, for a man who has worked this hard and come this far, is the most tragic thing of all.
Bro went from selling out arenas and charting Billboard hits to showing up on live streams, sweating, rambling, and completely out of it. And nobody around him is saying a word. One of the most talented rappers to ever come out of Florida. A kid who grew up in the projects with nothing and turned it into millions. And right now, in 2026, he is still fighting a battle that has been slowly taking everything from him: his health, his reputation, his career momentum. And most people aren't even talking about how bad it's actually gotten. Today, we're going inside Kodak Black's 2026 lifestyle. No cap. And what we found? It's sad for real. Let me set the scene for you real quick, because to understand where Kodak is right now, you gotta understand what he was. This is a man who, at 19 years old, had a debut album that debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200. A man who featured Travis Scott and Offset on a chart-topping single. A man who has earned platinum after platinum, who built his own label, Sniper Gang, from scratch, and who came from the kind of poverty that most people making music today have never seen in their life. Kodak Black was the real deal. The raw talent was undeniable. The come-up story was inspiring, and his connection to his fans, especially those who grew up like him, was genuine. This wasn't a manufactured artist. This was a real person who turned real pain into real music. And that's exactly why what's happening to him hurts so much to watch. But here's what really went down. The same environment that made him also started breaking him. And the substances that crept into his world didn't just affect a few interviews or one bad week. They started eating away at the foundation of everything he built. And the people closest to him, a lot of them either looked the other way or weren't equipped to help. We're gonna take a deep dive today. We're gonna go back to where this started, trace exactly how it escalated, talk about what his day-to-day life looks like in 2026, and ask the question that everybody who genuinely loves Kodak's music is asking right now. Why hasn't he gotten the real help he needs? Stay locked in, because this one hits different. Let's rewind, way back, because to understand Kodak Black's addiction, you can't just start at the moment things got bad. You gotta understand the soil he grew up in. Bill Kahan Capri, born Duson Octave on June 11, 1997, grew up in the Golden Acres housing projects in Pompano Beach, Florida. His father was not in the picture. His mother, Marceline, a Haitian immigrant, raised him on her own in one of the toughest environments in South Florida. From the jump, this kid was navigating a world where survival was the priority, not stability. Now here's what's important to understand. Kodak was not just some kid who fell into rap by accident. He was obsessed with it. By age 12, he was already in a rap group. He used to study the dictionary and thesaurus just to sharpen his bars. He started recording music at a local studio, impressing older guys who became his role models. Music was his way out. But by the time he was in middle school, he had already been expelled for fighting and arrested for auto theft. He once described his options growing up as sell the hip or rap. That was it. That was the choice. There was no guidance counselor pulling him aside. There was no safety net. And honestly, that framing right there, that binary choice between two dangerous paths, tells you everything you need to know about the mental space this kid was operating in before he even turned 15. When your only reference points for success involve risk and survival, you don't suddenly develop healthy coping mechanisms just because you start getting a check. The wiring is already done, the patterns are already set, so he chose rap, and he was great at it. By 2014, he dropped his breakthrough records and things started moving fast. Drake posted a video dancing to one of his songs. Atlantic Records came calling. By 2017, his debut album debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200 and Tunnel Vision peaked at number 6 on the Hot 100. This kid from the projects was now a legitimate superstar. And look, When that kind of success hits that fast at that age with that background, it's a lot to process. Most people don't have the tools to handle sudden wealth and fame even when they come from stable environments. Kodak came from the complete opposite of a stable environment. So the idea that he would navigate all of that perfectly without stumbling, that was never realistic. But nobody around him was making sure he had the right support system in place to even try. But this is important, because while all of that was happening on the surface, the environment around Kodak never really changed. The same streets, the same people, the same pressures. Fame added money and visibility, but it didn't add structure or healing. And for someone who had been through what Kodak went through from childhood, no father, poverty, legal trouble starting in middle school, that unhealed trauma doesn't just disappear because the numbers in your bank account change. This is where the foundation for everything that came later was laid. Not in a recording studio, not in a courtroom, but in a childhood where a kid never really got the chance to just be a kid. Now let's talk about how it escalated, because this didn't happen overnight. This was a slow build. The legal troubles started young, but they started accelerating once the spotlight hit. In 2016, Kodak was facing serious legal allegations in South Carolina, charges that wouldn't be fully resolved until 2021. That whole ordeal hung over him for years, years of uncertainty, years of legal battles. That kind of weight on a 19, 20, 21-year-old who's also trying to be a rap star. That does something to a person mentally. It chips away at you, and when you're already carrying the weight of a childhood like Kodak's, the absent father, the poverty, the early arrests, adding years of legal uncertainty on top of that is a recipe for someone to look for any way possible to escape the noise in their head. That's not an excuse. That's just the reality of how trauma and stress compound over time when they go unaddressed. Then in 2019, he was arrested for making false statements to purchase firearms and sentenced to nearly 4 years in federal prison. He served time until January 2021, when President Donald Trump commuted his sentence. While incarcerated, he actually released his third album from behind bars. Now, here's where it gets real, because it's easy to look at Kodak's legal history and just see a list of incidents. But what those incidents represent is a pattern of someone who never got the mental health support, the therapy, the real intervention they needed. Every time things seemed to be moving in a positive direction, something pulled him back. And a big part of what was pulling him back was the substances. His dependency on certain pills, specifically the kind of opioid painkillers that have devastated communities across the country, became something fans started noticing in his behavior long before he ever addressed it publicly. The energy was different. The interviews got more erratic. The performances became unpredictable. And the thing about opioid dependency in particular is that it doesn't always look the way people expect. It's not always someone who can't function. Sometimes it's someone who is highly functional on the outside, still touring, still recording, still showing up, while quietly falling apart on the inside. That slow deterioration is actually one of the most dangerous versions of addiction, because it's easy for everyone around the person to convince themselves that things aren't that bad. The shows are still happening. The music is still coming out. He must be fine. But fine and functional are not the same thing. And then in June 2024, Kodak finally pulled the curtain back during a live show in Los Angeles. He told the crowd directly about what he had been going through at his lowest, describing a level of daily consumption that was genuinely shocking. He said he averaged a staggering amount daily, and that on his heaviest days it was even worse. He said he wanted people to hear it as a warning, not as something to aspire to. He even expressed regret about lyrics in Super Gremlin, one of his biggest hits, because he felt like he had glorified that lifestyle at a time when he was deep in it. He said, "I don't want y'all to hear that and take that and feel like it's okay to do that," and for a minute it felt like a turning point, but that's not even the crazy part. Because around the same period, news broke that Kodak had also been using other substances beyond just the When he was arrested in 2023 under suspicion of carrying an illegal substance, he was candid about what he was actually using at the time, which included a second substance that shocked a lot of people. He said it in an interview. He didn't hide it. Let that sink in for a second. This is a 26-year-old man, someone with 5 children, a label, a platinum discography, openly admitting to multiple dependencies simultaneously. By May 2025, he was on one of the most respected hip-hop freestyle platforms in New York, and right in the middle of his verse, he rapped a line referencing his habit with that second substance. Social media exploded. Some people thought it was a lyrical flex. Others were genuinely alarmed. The reality is, For Kodak, it wasn't a metaphor. He'd already confirmed it was real. One fan wrote on TikTok, "Kodak, the only artist I've literally watched grow up and been fighting addiction. It really pulls at my heart because he can be so much more." And that's the thing. Everyone can see it. His fans can see it. Artists can see it. Industry people can see it. But the question of why nothing is changing, that's what we need to talk about. So here we are, 2026. What does Kodak Black's life actually look like right now? On the surface, there are signs of life. In April 2026, he performed at the April Fool's Comedy Jam at Barclays Center in New York City. He's been on a touring run, including dates through Texas on what's being called his Cowboy Bill Tour. He recently signed with one of the major booking agencies in the industry, which suggests that on the business side, people are still investing in him. His streaming numbers have reportedly been growing, gaining over 14,000 new followers in just the first 2 weeks of April alone. And musically, he reportedly dropped his 8th studio album recently, a project described as more autobiographical, more soulful, featuring collaborators like Pharrell, Gunna, and Lil Yachty. There's reportedly a 9-minute track where he opens up about his journey in a way he never has before. The music is there, the performances are happening, the platform is still alive. But here's where it gets complicated, because behind all of that, the addiction struggle has not gone away. And no amount of sold-out shows or streaming milestones changes what's happening behind closed doors. Let's go through it chronologically. In early 2024, Kodak was celebrating sobriety. He went on Instagram Live and told his fans he was proud of himself. He said his dosage was dramatically lower than it had ever been. He said he had never been that happy in his life. Fans were celebrating in the comments. It felt real. Then by July 2024, he was back with another update, saying he was sober for the most part and could go several days without substances. He even vowed to stop performing Super Gremlin because the song triggered dark feelings in him. He told his fans, "If the Gremlin can do it, y'all can do it." That's a man trying to use his struggle to inspire others. That's a man who wants to change. But then, November 2024 happened. Kodak appeared on one of the biggest streaming events of the year, and what fans saw was alarming. He was visibly not himself, rambling incoherently, sweating heavily, at one point appearing to take an unnamed substance on camera while millions of people watched. The internet went crazy. Concern was real and immediate. And then, shortly after, he went on Instagram Live to address the backlash, and instead of pushing back, he essentially confirmed it. A fan's comment about loving when he was sober set him off. His response was essentially that sobriety wasn't something he was interested in, that he was young, that he had money, and that he didn't see the point. "I'm too young to die sober," he said. That line hit people hard because it shows exactly the kind of mindset that makes addiction so difficult to break, especially when someone doesn't feel the full consequences yet. When you're 27, worth millions, still performing, still charting, the crisis doesn't always feel like a crisis from the inside. That's one of the most dangerous parts of addiction. The destruction is often invisible to the person living it until it's too late. And then came May 2025, when two respected voices who have done genuine work in the community around redemption and mental health were seen having a heart-to-heart with Kodak on the side of a road. A video went viral of one of them looking him dead in the eye and saying, "You special. Don't ever doubt yourself. And you got them babies counting on you." The scene was raw, authentic. You could feel the genuine love and concern, but even that conversation didn't seem to change the trajectory. Because weeks later, he was referencing substances and freestyles again. The cycle continued, and that's the part that really gets you, because it shows just how deep this goes. It's not something that a good conversation, no matter how heartfelt, can fix on its own. In 2026, Kodak is 28 years old. He has 5 children. He has a label, he has a fan base that genuinely loves him. He is still performing, still making music, but the addiction, the multi-substance dependency that he himself has confirmed publicly on multiple occasions, is still there. And the real, structured, clinical help that someone in his situation actually needs, it doesn't appear to be happening. This is the part of the conversation that people don't want to have. But we have to have it, because when we ask why Kodak isn't getting the help he needs, the answer isn't just about Kodak. It's about everyone around him. Let me break it down for you. First, the entourage problem. This is not unique to Kodak. It's something that has played out with artist after artist throughout hip-hop history. When you blow up, you bring your people with you. The guys from the block, the cousins, the childhood friends, and there's loyalty in that, real loyalty. But loyalty isn't the same as accountability. And when you're the one with the money, the fame, and the power in the group, nobody wants to be the one who speaks up. Nobody wants to be cut off. Nobody wants to tell the man who's paying for everything that what he's doing is killing him. So instead, a lot of people just go along with it. They're in the videos, they're at the shows, they're on the live streams. But when Kodak is visibly struggling, the room gets quiet. And that silence, that comfortable, financially motivated silence, is one of the most dangerous things in that man's life right now. Second, the industry problem. The music industry has a long, documented, uncomfortable history of profiting from artists who are struggling. As long as the music comes out and the tours happen and the streaming numbers move, there's money being made. And when there's money being made, the business side of things doesn't always create space for conversations about health and wellness. That's a systemic issue that goes far beyond Kodak Black, but it absolutely plays a role in why someone can be visibly struggling and still have a full touring schedule, a new album, and a freshly signed booking deal. The industry will celebrate your comeback and book your next tour while simultaneously ignoring the fact that you might be falling apart behind the scenes. That's just the reality of how the business works. And until the people profiting from Kodak's output decide that his life is worth more than his next release, nothing structurally changes. Third, Kodak himself. And this one requires some nuance, because we have to be careful not to reduce addiction to a moral failure. It's not. Addiction is a medical condition. It rewires the brain. It changes how a person perceives risk and consequence. And for someone who grew up the way Kodak did, with trauma, with instability, with no real blueprint for what healthy coping looks like, the path to substances is one that has been laid since childhood. But that I'm too young to die sober line, that reflects a real belief. That sobriety means boredom, means loss, means something being taken from him. That's a psychology that requires professional intervention to work through. You can't just tell someone with that mindset to get help and expect it to click. They have to come to a place where they want what sobriety offers more than they want what the substances offer. And getting someone to that place, especially someone as stubborn and self-reliant as Kodak has always been, takes more than a viral conversation on a roadside. Fourth, the accountability gap. When another rapper was asked about Kodak's behavior on that Twitch stream, he defended him by saying sometimes that's just how rappers act. In our society, that's how we act. He wasn't being malicious. He was defending a peer. But that statement reveals something about the cultural normalization of substance use in certain spaces within hip-hop. When the behavior is normalized, it becomes harder to call out, harder to address, harder for the person living it to see it as a problem. And even the relationships closest to his children have reportedly been entangled in conflict rather than collaboration around getting him help. In May 2025, Kodak publicly accused some of his children's mothers of using fake pages to spread stories about his substance use. Whether that's true or not, what it tells us is that even the co-parenting relationships, the ones that should be most motivated to see him healthy for the sake of those kids, are caught up in drama instead of solutions. 5 children, and a cycle of public relapses. That combination should be the loudest alarm bell in the room. There have been people who genuinely tried. The roadside conversation was real. Fans have shown up in comment sections with genuine concern, and there have been moments where his own words showed he wanted better for himself. But the gap between expressing concern and actual intervention, structured, clinical, professional intervention, is enormous. And it doesn't seem like that gap has been bridged. So let's zoom out. Because this story isn't just about Kodak Black. This is about a pattern that hip-hop has seen over and over, and that we keep not learning from. The difference between artists who made it through their darkest chapter and those who didn't isn't always talent. It's not always money. A lot of times it comes down to the structures that exist around a person at their most vulnerable moment. And right now, those structures around Kodak are not holding the way they need to. Kodak Black, at 28 with 5 children, with a platinum discography, with millions of fans who still ride for him, he has reasons to fight for his life. He has said as much himself in his more lucid moments. He has expressed pride when he's made progress. He has tried to use his struggle to warn others. That's a foundation to build on, but a foundation only matters if someone helps you build on top of it. Right now, that next step, the real, sustained professional support, is what's missing. But intentions without infrastructure don't build houses. And right now, the infrastructure for Kodak's recovery doesn't seem to be matching the scale of what he's dealing with. And in a weird way, the fact that the music is still working almost makes things harder, because as long as the shows sell and the album charts, there's always a reason to postpone the hard conversation. But none of that means he's okay. You can be unwell and still functional. You can be in crisis and still charting. The rap career that Kodak has built is remarkable by any standard. A kid with no father, raised in poverty, who taught himself vocabulary from a dictionary, who started rapping at 12 and built a career that spans nearly a decade of chart hits and cultural influence. That's enormous. And the tragedy of watching that same person navigate a very public addiction struggle without adequate support, that's real. This man deserves better, and he is capable of better. Those two things can both be true at the same time. His fans feel it. The comments on every viral clip say it. I hope he gets help. He can be so much more. This breaks my heart. That's not hate. That's people who grew up listening to this man expressing genuine concern for his life. And that kind of love, the kind that comes from people who don't know you personally but feel like they do because your music was the soundtrack to real moments in their life, that's rare. Not every artist has that. Kodak has it. And it would be a tragedy to let it go to waste. What does his legacy look like going forward? Honestly, that's still being written, and that's actually something to hold on to, because he's 28. He's not a finished story. There are artists who have gone through struggles as deep or deeper and come out the other side with their greatest work still ahead of them. It's possible. It happens. But it requires the right support, the right moment, and the right decision. And it requires the people around that artist to finally choose the hard road over the comfortable one. So to the people in Kodak's circle who might be watching this, the real ones, the ones who actually love this man, it's time. Not a conversation on the side of a road, not a comment on a live stream. Real, professional, structured help. The kind that requires sacrifice and hard conversations, the kind that might cost you your access to him for a while, but the kind that might actually save his life, because at the end of the day, what's worth more? Your spot in the entourage or the man himself making it to 40? And for the fans, keep showing love. Don't abandon him. Because one of the only things that can sometimes break through when nothing else can is knowing that people genuinely care. And clearly, based on every comment section, every concerned post, every fan who has kept streaming his music while hoping he gets better, the love is there. That love is real. And real love tells the truth even when it's uncomfortable. Kodak Black at his best is one of the most authentic voices hip-hop has ever produced. And we want to see what that sounds like at 35, at 40, on the other side of the storm. That's what he's capable of, and that's what's at stake. We'll keep watching, we'll keep hoping, and we'll keep telling the truth, because that's what real support looks like. Stay up, Yak.
One thing I don't do, I'm the type of person, I'm a team player. So if God was in a situation and I feel like somebody feels trying to take his life, you damn right I'm gonna ride.
Imagine going from flexing millions, riding private jets, cracking all the huzz you dreamed of, and repping one of the most powerful labels in hip-hop to going completely ghost. No music, no deals, no buzz, nothing. We're talking about Black Youngsta, and here's the part that's gonna blow your mind. He got dropped from CMG, Yo Gotti's label, and now, word is he's out here practically begging Gotti to let him back in. And on top of that, the money is running out, the streams are dry, the features are gone, and the streets are saying Youngsta might actually be going broke. Oh my God, that is crazy. But wait, before we get into all of that, I need to break down the full story. Because y'all, this ain't just some random rapper falling off. This is a whole rise, a whole fall, a whole betrayal, a whole ghost story, and it's wild from start to finish. So sit down, lock in, and do not click away, because I promise you, the ending of this story is something nobody saw coming. Let's get into it. His real name is Sammy Marquez Benson, born April 8, 1990 in Memphis, Tennessee. And not just Memphis, gang. We're talking McMillan Street on the south side, one of the roughest pockets in a city that's already known for being rough. No cap, this dude grew up with literally nothing. Him and his younger brothers were raised by their grandparents because his parents weren't in the picture. And even the grandparents, both of them working, could barely keep food on the table. Bro, think about that for a second. Both grandparents have jobs and they're still struggling. That's the environment Youngsta came up in. That's what shaped him. His grandfather even got him a job at a local grocery store when he was 7 years old. And he got fired because the manager caught him placing fake orders so he could take food home. 7 years old, bro. That's not crime. That's survival. Y'all seeing this? The come up was real. So naturally, growing up in that kind of poverty, the streets were right there. Memphis streets don't play, and Youngsta didn't play either. He was living that life before music was ever even a thought. But at some point, he found rap, and rap, for a lot of dudes from that environment, becomes the only way out. He started putting out music seriously around 2012, released his debut mixtape called Fast Bricks, then kept grinding. Fast Bricks 2, Fast Bricks 3, tape after tape, just building a name in Memphis. No label, no cosign, no budget, just a dude from the South Side who was hungry and had nothing to lose. And here's where it gets crazy, because most rappers grind for years and nobody notices. But Youngsta, he made something that caught everybody's attention. And I mean everybody. So get this, it's 2015, Black Youngsta drops a record called Heavy. And bro, if you haven't heard it, go listen right now. That record was hard. Memphis energy, real street vibes, and it started spreading fast. People were playing it everywhere. But here's the part that nobody was expecting. Yo Gotti, the guy, the Memphis king, the label boss, the Yo Gotti, he hears Heavy and loses his mind over it. Now Gotti at this point had been in the game for decades. He'd already built Collective Music Group, formerly known as Cocaine Music Group. He'd studied Cash Money, studied Rock Nation, studied every great label that ever existed. He was looking for the right talent, and when he heard Heavy, he knew he'd found something. But here's how the actual connection happened. And this is the part that's genuinely insane, no cap. Youngsta showed up to one of Yo Gotti's video shoots, uninvited, just pulled up, and he was blasting his own music, just straight up blasting it in the parking lot at a Yo Gotti shoot. That is bold, that is unhinged, that is Memphis. And Gotti noticed. He said it himself. Within however long it took to film that video, they were already pulling off talking about Youngsta, meaning he made such an impression that Gotti was discussing him with his people before the shoot was even wrapped. Bro, that is crazy. He literally crashed the shoot and walked away with a label deal. That's not a rap story, that's a movie. So Gotti hopped on the Heavy remix. That was the stamp. That was Gotti saying to the whole world, this is my guy. And shortly after that, it became official. In 2015, Black Youngsta signed to Collective Music Group, and the signing? Oh, it didn't happen in some boring boardroom. Gotti signed him on a private jet. He literally posted about it. Welcome to CMG. This your shot, homie. You get back what you put in. On a private jet. Gang, if you come from nothing and you're signing a deal on a private jet, that feeling has to be indescribable. That's the American dream for a kid from McMillan Street who used to steal food at 7 years old. So now Youngsta is CMG, and things start moving fast. His first mixtape under the label, I Swear to God, dropped September 2015. Gotti was on it. Boozy Badazz was on it. It was a statement. Then he started establishing his own imprint under CMG called Heavy Camp. That's important because Heavy Camp was his brand inside the CMG umbrella, his own lane, his own identity. The releases kept coming, tape after tape. He was building momentum the right way, staying active, staying in the streets, staying relevant. And then 2017 happened. Hip Hopper, that record blew up. Then 2018, Booty. And y'all, Booty is the one that really put him in front of the mainstream. That record peaked at number 73 on the Billboard Hot 100. It got a gold certification. For a dude from the south side of Memphis who was raised by his grandparents and got fired from a grocery store at 7, that's a whole other level. His debut studio album, 223, peaked at number 42 on the Billboard 200. That is a real number. That's not a fluke. That means people were actually buying and streaming this man's music in serious numbers. He followed it up with Church on Sunday in 2019. CMG was growing. Moneybagg Yo was shooting up the charts. 42 Doug was coming. ESTG was coming. It felt like a dynasty was being built, and Youngsta was right there in the middle of it. He was doing collabs with Tory Lanez, T.I., DaBaby, G-Eazy, Wiz Khalifa, Ty Dolla $ign. He did a whole joint project with Moneybagg Yo. He was everywhere. Y'all seeing this? From crashing a video shoot in Memphis with his own music blasting, to Billboard charts, gold records, collabing with some of the biggest names in rap, that is an insane run. But here's where it starts to get complicated, because around the same time Youngsta was on his rise, there was a shadow over Memphis, a beef, a real one, and it was about to change everything. Okay, chat, this is where it gets heavy, and I need y'all to lock in because this part of the story is serious. Yo Gotti had a long-running beef with Young Dolph, another Memphis rapper who built his whole career independently and was beloved on the streets. Dolph and Gotti went back and forth for years, and in the middle of that beef, Black Youngsta was Gotti's soldier. In 2016, Youngsta filmed a video of himself pulling up to Dolph's South Memphis neighborhood heavily armed. He dropped diss tracks. He was the one on the front lines of the beef while Gotti mostly stayed on the sidelines. That's important. Remember that. Now jump to November 2021. The unthinkable happens. Young Dolph gets shot and killed at a cookie shop in Memphis. The whole city is mourning.
The rapper Young Dolph is gunned down and killed at a South Memphis cookie shop.
There will be extra police presence in many parts of the city.
The whole rap world is in shock. Dolph was loved. He was independent. He had built something real. He had a family. And just like that, he was gone. And what does Black Youngsta do almost immediately after? He performs Shake Some, his diss track against Dolph, at a concert in Dallas, with people in the crowd, while the whole city is still grieving. Oh my God, bro. The backlash was immediate, and it was severe. And if that wasn't enough, he drops a new music video where he's walking through a cemetery and stops at a gravestone with the name Thornton on it. Dolph's last name was Thornton. Gang, people lost it. Dolph's fans, Dolph's family, the Memphis community, they were furious. And suddenly all eyes were on Gotti. Is he gonna check Youngsta? Is he gonna cut him loose? Reports started flying everywhere. Blogs, social media, saying that Youngsta had been dropped from CMG. And for a minute, those rumors were running so hot that it felt like fact. But then Gotti got on Twitter and said, "I'm seeing too much cap on these blogs. Fake news, Lil Bro a boss, he can't be dropped." And then he told everyone to keep his name out of the rumors. So on paper, Youngsta was still CMG. Gotti defended him publicly. But here's the thing, and this is where you gotta read between the lines. Gotti's defense was real short, real surface level. He didn't say Youngsta did the right thing. He didn't say I stand behind him 100%. He just said he can't be dropped. There's a difference. And from that point forward, things were never quite the same. Now here's where it gets real, and this is where I need y'all to pay close attention. Because what happened to Black Youngsta after the Dolph situation isn't a single moment. It's a slow burn. It's a fade. And the music industry fade is one of the coldest things that can happen to an artist. Because nobody ever officially tells you it's over. They just stop. Look at CMG after 2021. Gotti's label was ascending to new heights. They locked in an 8-figure partnership deal with Interscope Records. 8 figures, gang. That's massive. Moneybagg Yo dropped A Gangsta's Pain and it hit #1 on the Billboard 200. Twice. 42, Doug was moving, ESTG was moving. And then in 2022, CMG signed Glorilla, and she became a phenomenon almost overnight. Grammy nominations, BET Awards, top 10 pop hits. Where was Youngsta in all of this? On the CMG compilation album in 2022, he had a feature. That's it. While Moneybagg Yo was running the charts and Glorilla was the hottest new thing in rap, the dude who was literally the second artist ever signed to CMG after Yo Gotti built this whole machine was getting a feature credit. Bro, that is cold. That is the industry telling you something without saying a single word. The streams were dying down. The features from big names dried up. The label wasn't pushing his projects the way they were pushing everybody else, and people started noticing. Why isn't CMG giving Youngsta the same resources? Why isn't he getting the same promo budget? Why is the second artist ever signed to this label being treated like the last priority? And here's the tea. Some people think the Dolph situation poisoned the well in ways nobody could ever fully fix. Because even though Gotti defended Youngsta publicly, the whole situation brought a cloud over CMG that Gotti didn't need. And having your artist performing diss tracks and making cemetery videos days after a man got murdered, that's PR damage that doesn't just disappear. So the label kept him technically on the roster, but the support was drying up like a puddle in the Memphis summer heat. So word started circulating that Youngsta had announced his departure from CMG. Not just rumors this time, publicly. He was done. He was going independent. The narrative was that he was fed up with being the last artist on the label to get support, tired of watching everybody else eat while he was sitting at the table with an empty plate. And on one hand, you can understand it. If you built your name, helped put a label on the map, rode for that label through everything, and then you watch new signees get more attention and more resources than you, that's a gut punch. That's disrespect without saying a word. But here's the part that's crazy. Going independent sounds good on paper, but it costs money, real money. You need to fund your own rollouts, your own videos, your own marketing, your own distribution deals, your own PR. When you're on a label, all of that is being handled, even if they're not pushing you the way you want. The moment you leave, all of that falls on you. And if your streaming numbers have been declining and the features aren't coming in, going indie is basically going into battle without armor. Some people close to the situation started saying that financially, things were getting tight. The streams were a fraction of what they used to be. The touring money wasn't what it was during the peak years. And without label backing, without that Interscope distribution muscle behind him, getting his music heard was becoming a real challenge. He started moving quietly. Less social media, less public appearances, less everything. And when a rapper who used to be everywhere suddenly goes quiet, people start asking questions. Where's Youngsta? What happened to him? Why isn't he dropping? Why is he gone ghost? Now I gotta get a little more serious for a second, because this part is real. Gang, Black Youngsta has gone through something that would break most people. He's lost multiple brothers to the streets of Memphis. Multiple, not one. Multiple brothers. And if you know anything about Memphis, you know those streets are unforgiving. He was trying to get his people out. He was rapping, he was grinding, he was making money. And he was trying to use that money to pull his family out of the environment that made him. And he kept losing them anyway. That kind of weight doesn't just affect you emotionally, it affects how you move. It affects your music, it affects your decisions, it affects whether you want to be in the spotlight or whether you'd rather stay in the dark because the spotlight brings attention. And in Memphis, attention can cost you everything. So when people ask, why did Youngsta go ghost? Some of it is label stuff, some of it is financial, but some of it is also just a man carrying more pain than anyone on the outside can really understand. And that's why I always say, we gotta be careful how we talk about artists who fall off, because we don't always know what they're going through behind closed doors. All right, gang, here's the part you've been waiting for. And this is where the story comes full circle. Because the word on the street is that Youngsta has been making moves to get back in Gotti's good graces. That after going independent, after going ghost, after realizing that the label machine is something you cannot just replicate on your own overnight, he's been trying to get back to CMG. Now, let me be clear. Nobody has come out on camera and said Youngsta called Gotti begging, but the situation around him is telling a story. And sometimes the situation speaks louder than any quote. Think about it. His departure from CMG happened right around the time that a CMG affiliate was going through a trial connected to the Young Dolph murder case. The timing of Youngsta publicly separating himself from CMG right before all that legal heat started flaring up. Some people are saying that was intentional. Some are saying he was pushed out so the label could protect itself. Others are saying he left voluntarily and is now regretting it. Either way, the result is the same. Youngsta is out here without the infrastructure he had for nearly a decade. And when you've been signed to a label since 2015, when your entire career has been built with that infrastructure behind you, and then suddenly it's gone, that adjustment is brutal. There's a reason his most recent independent releases haven't generated the same numbers as his CMG-backed work. Not because the music is bad, but because distribution, marketing, and playlist placement matter. And those things cost money and connections that most independent artists simply do not have. So what does a guy do when he realizes going indie isn't working the way he hoped? When the streams aren't where they need to be, when the money is getting tight, when the label he built his career with has become the label that's thriving without him, you go back, or at least, you try. And by all accounts, that's exactly where Youngsta is right now, trying to figure out how to get back into the machine, trying to reconnect with Gotti, because without it, and this is the cold truth of the music business, even a talented artist from a legendary rap city can fade into nothing. Bro, that's actually insane. I'm not even lying. The same dude who crashed a video shoot just to get Gotti's attention back in 2015 is now in a position where he might need that same energy all over again just to stay relevant. Now let's talk about the money, because this is a conversation that needs to happen. A lot of people look at rappers who were buzzing in 2017 and 2018 and assume those guys are set for life. But gang, that is not how this industry works. When you're signed to a label, a lot of what looks like wealth is actually fronted. Advances, label money, per diem from tours, marketing budgets. All of that gets recouped, meaning the label takes it back from your royalties before you see a real check. So even if your album goes gold and your songs are getting millions of streams, if your advances were big enough, you might not see significant royalty money for years. And the lifestyle, the jewelry, the cars, the flexing, that comes fast and goes faster, especially when you've got family you're trying to take care of. especially when you've lost people and you're spending on funerals and trying to help people in your community. That money moves. So when the label stops pushing your projects, streams start dropping, touring money slows down, and you're now independent with no promo budget. The math starts getting scary real fast. People close to the situation have been saying the same thing, that financially things are not where they used to be for Youngsta. And that is a devastating place to be for a man who worked his whole life to escape poverty. Going from private jet signings to watching your bank account shrink while your former label mates are signing 8-figure deals with Interscope, that's a nightmare. That is the part of the music industry nobody wants to talk about. They show you the rise, they show you the hits, they show you the Instagram flex, but they don't show you what happens when the machine stops. So where is he now? He has been releasing music independently under his Heavy Camp imprint. In 2024, he put out Black Sheep 2. In 2025, he released the Heavy Camp compilation, Checkmate. So the music is still coming. He hasn't completely gone silent, but the reception is a fraction of what it was during his CMG peak. No major label push, no Billboard charting, no big press coverage. His presence on social media has been inconsistent, showing up, then going quiet. And the conversations happening in Memphis rap circles are centered around one question: what's next? Because here's the real question, gang. And this is the one I want y'all to sit with. Is there a version of this story where Black Youngsta gets back to that level without Yo Gotti and CMG? Maybe. Memphis has produced independent legends. Young Dolph himself proved that you can build something massive without a major label. But Dolph built his independence when he was at his commercial peak, not after he'd already faded. Youngsta's window might be different, and the people around him know it, which is why the conversations about reconnecting with Gotti keep coming up, because sometimes the smartest move isn't pride. Sometimes the smartest move is picking up the phone and saying, look, whatever happened between us, let's figure it out, because I'm better inside this machine than outside of it. And that's the full story, gang. That's everything, from McMillan Street to crashing Gotti's video shoot, from signing on a private jet to going ghost, from gold records and Billboard charts to going independent and running out of runway. Black Youngsta is one of the most fascinating stories in Memphis rap because it's got everything: a real come-up, a loyalty that maybe went too far, a label situation that slowly squeezed him out, tragedy, loss, and now, the humbling. No cap, this is one of the wildest falls from inside a machine that I've seen in a long time. Because it wasn't a drug charge, it wasn't a major scandal, it was a slow fade, a quiet drift away from the people who built him. And now he's on the outside looking in at a label that's worth more than ever, and realizing that the door he helped build might be the door he needs to knock on again. Gang, if you watched all the way to the end, that means you're a real one. Real ones hit that like button. Real ones subscribe. Real ones leave a comment down below and tell me, do you think Yo Gotti should sign Black Youngsta again? Do you think Youngsta can rebuild on his own? Drop your thoughts. I read every single comment. And if you want more stories like this, make sure you're subscribed and hit that bell so you don't miss the next one, because I got more coming. And trust me, the next one, y'all are not ready. I'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace.
And me, I didn't realize what was going on. You get what I'm saying? Like, that was my biggest thing. I feel like I wasn't as woke as I should have been, like, if that makes sense. Like, I was young, you know what I mean? Like,
imagine being 19 years old, sitting on millions of dollars, your music playing everywhere, your name in every conversation, and then just a few years later, you're on camera talking about how the money is gone. That is exactly the situation we are breaking down today, because Lil Skies, one of the hottest young rappers to come out of the SoundCloud era, blew through $24 million in just 5 years. 24 million. And we are not just throwing that number around for clicks, because we are actually going to show you the clip of him sitting down and speaking openly about his money situation. And when you see it, you are going to have questions. A lot of it. Because how does someone who was that big, that fast, with that much momentum behind him, end up having a conversation like that? That is what we are here to figure out today. And real talk, before we even get into it, I want you to understand that the reality behind these numbers is way more complicated than the internet is making it seem. There is a difference between what people estimated he was worth, what he actually earned, and what the culture decided to believe. So stay with us, because this story is deeper than a simple rise and fall. What's good, fam? Welcome back. Let's get into it. Now, before we break down how he exactly blew through all this fucking money, We have to understand who Lil Skies actually was at his peak. Because if you were not locked in during that 2017 to 2019 window, you might not fully appreciate just how massive this kid was. Lil Skies, born Demetrius Christopher Foose, grew up in Waynesboro, Pennsylvania. Not a major city, not a rap hub, not somewhere you would traditionally expect a superstar to come from. His father was also a rapper, so music was always in his blood.
Me and my dad, we just bump heads a little bit, but music is the thing that kept me and my dad together. Like, that's how we connected. So anytime, pretty much, like, I would see my pops and stuff growing up, like, that's how it would be. It would be like, yo.
But it was the internet that gave him his moment. He started posting music online, building a following the way so many artists did during that era, grinding on SoundCloud, releasing freestyles, building buzz one play at a time, and then everything changed. In 2017, he dropped a track called Signs of Jealousy, and people started paying attention. But it was the song Welcome to the Rodeo featuring Landon Cube that really started turning heads. That record had something to it, an energy, a melody, a vibe that felt like it belonged to that specific moment in music. And then came Red Roses, also featuring Landon Cube, and that was the one that launched him into a completely different stratosphere. Red Roses was everywhere. It was in people's cars, on playlists, in the background of Instagram videos. It crossed over from the underground into the mainstream in a way that very few SoundCloud-era records did. And it turned Lil Skies from a rising artist into a legitimate star almost overnight. The streaming numbers were real, the attention was real, and naturally, the music industry came calling. He signed with All We Got Entertainment and Atlantic Records, which was one of the biggest deals a young artist from his lane could land at that time. Atlantic was not signing artists unless they believed there was serious money to be made. And with the momentum Lil Skies had built, the label clearly saw a long-term investment. Now, the exact terms of that deal were never officially disclosed to the public, but in the industry, a signing deal of that caliber for an artist with his trajectory typically comes with an advance in the range of $1 to $3 million, sometimes more depending on the contract structure. That advance alone would represent a significant chunk of the $24 million figure people throw around when they talk about his career earnings. But it was far from the only source of income he had coming in. When Life of a Dark Rose dropped in January of 2018, it debuted at number 10 on the Billboard 200. Let that sit for a second. A 19-year-old from a small town in Pennsylvania drops his debut album and it goes top 10 on the most prestigious chart in American music. That is not a small thing. That is a genuinely impressive achievement, and it opened doors that most young artists spend years trying to crack open. He followed it with Shelby in 2018 and then Unbothered in 2019, continuing to build out his catalog and prove that his debut was not a fluke. During this stretch, he was one of the most talked about young artists in hip-hop. Festivals were booking him. Venues were selling out. Brand interest was growing. The era of Lil Skies had arrived. And by all outward appearances, this kid was going to be around for a long time. Now let's talk about the money, because this is where we need to be real careful about separating facts from internet mythology. The $24 million figure that gets thrown around in conversations about Lil Skies did not come from a verified financial document. It did not come from a tax return or an official earnings report. It came from a combination of public estimates, streaming revenue calculations, tour income projections, merchandise assumptions, and the kind of internet math that tends to get inflated every time a story gets shared. So what did he actually earn? Let's try to piece it together with what we know. Streaming revenue for a song like Red Roses, which accumulated hundreds of millions of streams across platforms, would generate real money. Spotify pays artists somewhere between 3 and 5 thousandths of a dollar per stream on average, though this varies significantly based on deals, distribution arrangements, label splits, and other factors. On a song with 300 million streams, the gross revenue before label splits and distribution fees might be somewhere in the range of $900,000 to $1.5 million. But here is the critical piece that most people miss. The artist does not receive all of that money. Depending on the structure of their deal, a new or developing artist might only receive between 15 and 20% of streaming royalties after the label recoups the advance. That means what sounds like $1 million song might actually put significantly less in the artist's direct pocket, at least until the advance is fully recouped. Add to that his touring income, which during his peak years was genuinely strong. Headline shows for an artist at his level in 2018 were commanding between $20,000 and $50,000 per performance, sometimes more for festivals. If he was doing 100 shows a year, which is a reasonable estimate given how active he was, that could put his gross touring income anywhere between $2 and $5 million annually during his peak stretch. But again, touring has costs. There are booking agent fees, typically around 10%. There is management, usually another 15 to 20%. There are travel costs, hotel costs, crew salaries, production expenses, security, and 100 other line items that eat into what looks like a large number. By the time you pull all of that out, the net income from a tour that grossed $3 million might realistically be somewhere closer to $1 to $1.5 million when everything is settled. Then you add merchandise, which during this era was a real revenue stream for artists who could move product at their shows and online. Conservative estimates for a touring artist at his level might put merch income somewhere in the range of a few $100,000 annually during his peak. You add it all together, and across the span of his most active years, a realistic total earnings figure might land somewhere between $8 and $15 million. Still a lot of money, but it is also meaningfully different from $24 million. The internet took the high end of every estimate, added them together, and created a number that made the story feel bigger. And once that number started circulating, it became the headline, and the nuance got left behind. But here is where it gets real, because whether the number was 8 million or 24 million, the question of where the money went remains valid. And to understand that, we have to talk about what life looks like for a young artist who goes from nothing to everything in the span of about 18 months. Lil Skies was a teenager when the money started coming in. He had grown up in circumstances that were not wealthy. He had watched his father pursue music without the commercial breakthrough that his son would eventually achieve. And then suddenly he had more money than most people see in a lifetime. And he had it before his brain had even fully developed. Because science tells us the human prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for long-term decision-making and impulse control, is not fully formed until around age 25. He was 19, 21 when he was navigating all of this. And the culture around him, the music, the videos, the expectations of fans, the energy of the industry, all of it pointed in one direction: spin. The lifestyle that comes with being a successful young rapper in that era is not cheap. It is not designed to be. There are cars, and not used cars, but new high-end vehicles that depreciate the moment they leave the lot. There are chains and jewelry, which in hip-hop carry both personal significance and social currency, but represent significant one-time expenditures. There is travel. Not budget travel, but private planes and first-class accommodations. There are entourages, and this is a real and often overlooked cost, because keeping people around you means paying for their expenses, their food, their travel, their lifestyle in some cases. There is housing, because once you have made it, you cannot be living in an apartment that does not match your image. So you upgrade to something that carries a monthly cost of several thousand to tens of thousands of dollars. And all of this is happening simultaneously, and it feels sustainable in the moment because the money is coming in so fast that the outflow does not register as alarming. There is also something specific to the music industry that most people do not fully account for, and it is the cost of maintaining the appearance of success. In an era where image is everything and social media gives fans a constant window into your life, the pressure to look like you are winning is relentless. If Lil Skies posted a video in a regular car while his peers were posting with Lamborghinis, the internet would notice. And those kinds of comparisons can feel existential to a young artist who has built his brand on a certain aesthetic. So you spend to maintain the image, and the spending reinforces the image, and the image reinforces the expectation, and the cycle continues until something disrupts it. What disrupted it for Lil Skies, at least in terms of public perception, was the gradual slowdown in his musical output and public presence. After Unbothered in 2019, there was a noticeable shift. The releases became less frequent. The cultural conversation around him started to quiet down. Now, some of this was intentional. He spoke publicly about wanting to focus on his personal life, about having a child, about prioritizing his family and his mental health. And none of that is something to criticize. Those are legitimate and admirable priorities. But the music industry is unforgiving about one thing above everything else: momentum. And momentum, once lost, is extraordinarily difficult to rebuild. The streaming landscape was also changing around him. The SoundCloud era that had made him was giving way to new sounds, new aesthetics, new artists who were capturing the attention of the same young audience that had made him a star. Artists like Polo G, Rod Wave, Lil Durk and later artists in the drill and melodic rap space were pulling listeners in new directions. Playlists shifted, algorithm preferences evolved. The songs that had made Lil Skies famous were no longer being pushed to new listeners the way they had been at peak. And without new music consistently entering the ecosystem, his streaming income would have declined steadily. Touring also became less consistent. If you are putting out new music regularly, you have a reason to tour. You have new songs to perform, new fans to reach, new markets to tap into. But when your release schedule slows down, the demand for live shows tends to follow. The bookings become less frequent, the guarantees become lower because you are not the hottest name on the market anymore, and the income that touring provided during your peak years starts to shrink. Meanwhile, expenses do not shrink at the same rate. The car payments are still there. The housing costs are still there. The people around you still need to be supported. The lifestyle that was built during the peak years carries overhead that does not automatically adjust when the revenue does. This is the trap that catches so many young artists, and it is not unique to Lil Skies. It is a structural problem in the music industry that affects a huge number of artists who experience rapid success. The money comes in fast, the spending scales up quickly to match it, and then when the income slows or stops, the expenses are still there waiting every month. Financial advisors who work with athletes and entertainers call this the lifestyle creep problem, and it is responsible for more celebrity financial collapses than almost any other single factor. Now let's talk about the clip, because this is the moment that really ignited the online conversation about Lil Skies and money. He appeared in an interview or online discussion where he spoke openly and candidly about his financial situation, and what he described did not match the image of a rapper sitting on millions. He talked about the realities of where things stood, and the internet reacted with a combination of shock, sympathy, and the kind of hot take commentary that spreads fast on social media. Fans who remembered him at his peak, who had watched him perform at festivals and seen him in videos with all the markers of success, could not reconcile that version of him with what he was now describing. The disconnect felt enormous to people on the outside, but here is what a lot of those commenters were missing. What Lil Skies was describing was not some extraordinary failure unique to him. It was a variation of a story that has played out dozens of times in hip-hop history. TLC filed for bankruptcy despite having sold tens of millions of albums. MC Hammer lost an estimated $30 million and had to file for bankruptcy after one of the best-selling rap careers of the early 90s. Lauryn Hill faced financial and legal troubles despite her groundbreaking success. Ja Rule, Soulja Boy, and countless others have been public about financial difficulties that follow periods of enormous commercial success. The music industry is genuinely one of the most financially treacherous environments that exists, because it creates the appearance of wealth while quietly absorbing massive amounts of it through fees, advances, splits, and costs that most young artists do not fully understand until it is too late. And when you are a young artist from a background that did not include financial literacy education, when nobody in your family had ever managed millions of dollars, when the people around you are often just as new to this world as you are, the idea that you would navigate it perfectly is unrealistic. You need experts. You need accountants and financial advisors and lawyers who specialize in entertainment, and you need them before the money arrives, not after. And even with all of that, there is no guarantee, because the industry itself is structured in ways that often prioritize the label's return over the artist's long-term financial health. Let's also be real about something that does not get talked about enough in these conversations, which is mental health and its relationship to financial decisions. Lil Skies was very open during different points of his career about the pressures he was dealing with, about anxiety, about the difficulty of navigating fame at a young age, about missing a sense of normalcy. When you are dealing with that kind of internal weight, making long-term financially conservative decisions is not your first priority. Survival is. Comfort is. Finding ways to feel okay in a world that suddenly feels overwhelming is. And sometimes spending money is how that comfort gets sought, because you can and because every part of the environment around you encourages it. There is also the entourage dynamic that deserves direct discussion, because in hip-hop specifically, success carries a communal obligation that is deeply culturally embedded. When you make it, you bring your people with you. You pay for things. You cover expenses. You carry people who were with you before the money. And that is not a character flaw, it is a value system that is central to a lot of hip-hop culture. The idea that loyalty should be rewarded and that individual success is shared success. But that value system, while admirable in principle, can be extraordinarily expensive in practice. Maintaining a circle of people who are financially dependent on you, directly or indirectly, can drain significant amounts of money very quickly, especially when the income starts to slow. Now, what could Lil Skies have done differently? This is not about judging him, because he was operating with the information and emotional tools available to a teenager thrust into extraordinary circumstances. But looking at the decisions that led to this outcome, a few things stand out. The first is the importance of separating gross income from net income early before spending scales up. The second is the value of putting away a significant percentage of earnings during the peak years into accounts that are structured specifically to be difficult to access, so that the money is preserved even when the temptation to spend is high. The third is the reality that music careers, particularly in the streaming era, are highly susceptible to shifts in taste and cultural attention, and that diversifying income beyond music into investments, real estate, or business ventures during the peak period can create financial stability that outlasts a career's commercial apex. The fourth, and perhaps most important, is surrounding yourself with people who have a financial interest in your long-term well-being rather than your short-term decisions. A good business manager, a fiduciary financial advisor, an entertainment attorney who reviews every contract. These are not luxuries for artists at a certain level. They are necessities. And the cost of those professionals, which can feel significant when you are looking at your expenses, is almost always less than the cost of not having them. But again, all of this is easier to say from the outside looking in than it is to execute when you are 20 years old. Money is pouring in, and everything around you is telling you that this is the new normal, and it will last forever. Very few of us, at any age, are naturally equipped to handle sudden extreme wealth with perfect discipline. It takes either a prior framework built from education and experience, or the right advisors in place early enough to build that framework. And if neither of those things is present, the outcomes we see in Lil Skies' story become much more likely. What is also worth acknowledging is that Lil Skies did not disappear entirely. He continued making music, continued engaging with his audience, and showed a willingness to be transparent about a situation that many artists in similar positions choose not to display. There is actually something to be respected in the fact that he did not hide behind a manufactured image of continued wealth when his reality had shifted. He talked about it. He was honest about where things stood. And in a culture that often demands that artists project invincibility regardless of what is actually happening, that kind of openness takes a certain kind of courage. The reaction from his fan base was also telling. Many of the people who had grown up listening to him, who were now themselves in their early to mid-20s, responded with something closer to empathy than judgment. They had watched him grow up in public, had followed his journey from the early SoundCloud days through his commercial peak and into the quieter period that followed, and they connected with the vulnerability he was showing. The response was not universal, of course, because the internet always contains a segment of people ready to pile in, but there was a genuine wave of support from people who felt connected to him, not just as an artist, but as someone they had followed through a significant period of their own lives. His story also opened up a broader conversation about the SoundCloud era specifically and what happened to many of the artists who defined it. XXXTentacion was tragically killed in 2018. Juice WRLD passed away in 2019. Lil Peep had died in 2017. The era that produced so much creativity and commercial success also produced devastating losses, and many of the artists who survived it found that the landscape they had thrived in had fundamentally changed by the early 2020s. The algorithms, the playlists, the cultural energy had moved on, and artists who had been positioned as the future of rap were suddenly having to figure out how to stay relevant in a market that had already shifted its focus to the next wave. Lil Skies was navigating all of that at the same time he was navigating personal life transitions, family responsibilities, and the financial realities of a career that had not maintained its commercial velocity. It is a lot for anyone to manage, and the fact that his story became a public conversation about money rather than a more nuanced discussion about the complexity of his situation says more about how social media processes celebrity narratives than it does about him specifically. The broader lesson here is one that applies far beyond hip-hop. Fast money, regardless of its source, carries enormous risks when the infrastructure to manage it is not in place. Whether you are a young athlete, a tech entrepreneur, a lottery winner, or a rapper who goes viral at 19, the absence of financial education and professional guidance in the early stages of sudden wealth is a formula for the kind of outcomes that become cautionary tales. And those cautionary tales matter, not as entertainment, but as information that might help someone else make different decisions before they face the same circumstances. The music industry specifically needs to take more responsibility for the artists it profits from. Labels invest enormously in their own recoupment structures, ensuring that they recover their advances and costs before the artist sees significant royalties. But that same level of investment in structure is rarely applied to ensuring that artists understand what they are signing, how royalties work, what their actual take-home will be after all deductions, and what they should do with it when it arrives. There is a systemic failure here that produces the same outcomes repeatedly, and until labels, management companies, and the broader music industry ecosystem treat artists' financial literacy as a priority, these stories will keep happening. For Lil Skies himself, the story is not over. He is still young, he still has an audience. He still has the ability to create music that connects with people. Financial setbacks, even significant ones, are not permanent conditions when the person experiencing them is willing to be honest about what happened and make different choices going forward. There are artists who have gone through moments that look like the end and rebuilt something real and lasting on the other side. The question is what he does with the clarity that comes from having gone through something like this. Because clarity, however painfully it arrives, is one of the most valuable things a person can have. The $24 million number may be exaggerated. The actual figure of what he earned and what he lost may never be fully known to the public. But what is not exaggerated is the pattern, the speed of the rise, the scaling of the lifestyle, the slowdown in income, the continued pressure of expenses, and the eventual moment of reckoning that public figures in this position tend to face when the gap between their image and their reality becomes impossible to maintain. That is the real story here. Not a specific dollar amount, a pattern that is as old as the entertainment industry itself, and as urgent as it has ever been for the people living inside it right now. At the end of the day, Lil Skies gave us real music during a real moment. He connected with a generation of young people who heard something in his voice and his sound that spoke to them. The fact that his financial journey became complicated does not erase that contribution. It adds to the full picture of who he is, a talented artist who came up fast in a system that was not designed to protect him, and who is now navigating the consequences of decisions made during some of the most intense years of his life. That is a human story. And human stories deserve more than a meme or a comment section clowning session. They deserve context. What are your thoughts on Lil Skies' situation and where he goes from here? Drop them in the comments and check out the video on screen for more stories like this. 1.
And talk to me about your relationship with your brother.
With my brother? That's my brother.
Is there a close relationship that you have as well, yeah?
Man, we got a close relationship. He more like a father, but a brother at the same time.
Right now, as you're watching this, Bway, the blood little brother of one of the most streamed rappers on the entire planet, is still out here posted up in the same trenches of Baton Rouge he grew up in. No mansion, no security detail, no private jet, just the same block, the same dangers, the same zip code he was born into. Meanwhile, his older brother NBA, Youngboy, has been stacking hundreds of millions of streams, sitting on a net worth estimated between $6 and $10 million. Living out in Utah, receiving a presidential pardon, navigating courtrooms with high-powered private attorneys who get paid more per hour than most people make in a month. And while Youngboy was building a legacy that broke Elvis Presley's RIAA certification record, his own blood was catching a second-degree murder charge at 16 years old with a public defender. A free lawyer. Let me say that one more time. A public defender. The kind of lawyer that gets assigned to you when you have absolutely nothing. While his brother was posting million-dollar bonds. That contrast right there should make you stop and think. But to really understand how we got to this point, we gotta rewind all the way back. We gotta talk about where these two came from, who their father was, how their paths crossed coming up, and exactly where the road split. Because the story of Bway Youngie is not just sad, it is a lesson about what happens when success travels in only one direction. Stick with me through this whole video because by the end, you're gonna see this situation in a completely different light. Let's go all the way back. Baton Rouge, Louisiana, capital city of the state, population just over 200,000. But don't let the government building energy fool you, because for the people growing up in the rougher sections of that city, specifically East Baton Rouge Parish, those government buildings might as well be on another planet. Baton Rouge consistently ranks among the most dangerous cities in the United States per capita. High poverty, limited opportunities, a cycle of street violence that has been grinding people up for generations.
A study by Money Geek says the capital city ranks in the top 10 most dangerous places in the country for morning commutes. This is based on the average.
And here's what makes Baton Rouge different from a lot of other cities. It has a track record of producing world-class rappers who come directly from those conditions. Boozy Badazz, Kevin Gates, NBA Youngboy. Artists whose music carries the actual DNA of a place where one wrong decision, one wrong block at the wrong time can end your whole story. The city doesn't produce that kind of music from comfort, it produces it from something much darker. This is the environment that produced Kentrell Deshaun Gaulden, born October 20th, 1999. His father was sentenced to 55 years in federal prison for armed robbery when Kentrell was just 8 years old. Think about that age for a second. 8 years old is still losing teeth. 8 years old, your father is gone for essentially the rest of his natural life. His mother, Sherhonda, was working a cashier job at ExxonMobil trying to keep things together, but eventually that arrangement fell apart too, and Youngboy was raised by his maternal grandmother, Alice Gaulden. He dropped out of school in 9th grade, got arrested for robbery as a teenager.
Are you still in school?
Nope.
Dropped out?
Yep. I got a dream to chase.
What grade did you drop out at?
9th.
And while he was sitting in a juvenile detention facility with nothing around him but walls and time, he started writing lyrics, started putting words together in a way that would eventually make him one of the most certified artists in the history of recorded music. That's where NBA Youngboy was really born. Not in a studio, but in a cell, finding the one thing the system couldn't take from him. Now here's where the family situation gets layered. Because Youngboy's father didn't only leave one child behind when those prison doors closed. A few years after Kentrell was born, another child came into the picture through the same man. Different mother, same blood. Born January 7th, 2003, that child was Jeffrey Tate, the same person the world would eventually know as Bway Youngie. And this is a detail that matters when you're trying to understand the full picture. Youngboy and Bway are half-brothers, same father, different mothers, which means they did not grow up under the same roof. They did not share the same household. They shared a city, a last name in the street sense, a lineage defined by an absent father doing a 55-year bid, and the reality of growing up in one of the most dangerous environments in Louisiana without a man in the house to show them the way. Now, some people try to use that half-brother distinction to minimize the bond. That's cap. When you're from the hood and you come from the same blood, the technicality of which mother raised you matters a lot less than the shared reality you're both living inside. Bway grew up knowing who his older brother was, knowing what Kentrell was building. And in a neighborhood where options are scarce and role models are rarer, watching your older brother go from a kid with nothing to a rapper with everything doesn't just inspire you. It becomes the only map you can see. That's not a small thing. That's the entire foundation of what Bway tried to do with his own life. What makes Bway's origin story particularly heavy is that he came into the world already a step behind where even Youngboy started. His father was already locked up by the time Jeffrey was forming any real awareness of the world around him. No memories of a father figure in the house. No buffer between him and the street culture that surrounds you when you grow up in that part of Baton Rouge. You learn early that the environment has rules, and either you figure those rules out or the environment figures you out first. Growing up watching that, breathing that every single day, it shapes you in ways that don't show up until something goes wrong. By the time NBA Youngboy started making real noise in 2015 and 2016, he was already proving that the impossible was possible for someone from those streets. His mixtape 38 Baby put him on the radar. Before I Go built the buzz. Then songs like Outside Today crossed from the underground into actual mainstream attention. YouTube views started hitting hundreds of millions. His fan base, which people in the industry kept underestimating, turned out to be one of the most loyal and consistent in the entire genre. He was dropping music at a pace that nobody could match, reportedly over 100 songs in 2018 alone. Labels were paying attention, money started coming, real money. And with that money came choices. The biggest one was where to live. Youngboy made the move out of Baton Rouge. Over the years, he bounced between Louisiana, Texas, Georgia, California, and eventually settled in Utah, where he was living on house arrest while fighting his most recent federal case. He was putting geographic distance between himself and the environment that raised him. And again, nobody can fault a man for wanting to physically remove himself from danger. That's the goal. That's what making it is supposed to look like. But Bway wasn't removed. Bway stayed. Whether that was by choice, by circumstance, or by the absence of an offer to leave, the result was the same. Youngboy got out and Bway stayed in the exact same world. And while Youngboy was out there accumulating certifications and baby mamas and legal battles he had the resources to fight, Bway was on those same blocks, still subject to every risk that comes with being a young black man from East Baton Rouge with no financial cushion and no security around him. Here is where it starts getting really real, because Bway didn't just sit on the block waiting for a handout. Let me make that clear. This kid looked at his brother's trajectory and decided he was going to build his own lane in music. He officially launched his career in 2020, and the introduction was legitimate. His debut single, Who Wandu Some, came through David G's YouTube channel, one of the most important platforms for emerging Louisiana artists, and it landed. People were rocking with it not because of the famous last name, but because Bway actually had a voice. He had a style that was rooted in his experience without being a carbon copy of Youngboy's delivery. He had his own thing. He followed that with Sin Again, which showed real emotional range. Trap Talk came next, and then Message Sent. By the end of 2020, he had released his first full project, 6 Ways to It. In 2021, he dropped Dark Hearted, which included the single When You See Me, a track that music blogs called a genuine showcase of his writing ability. Then in 2022, he came back with Success Before Destruction, and that album title alone says a lot about where his head was at. The man knew the walls were closing in. He was trying to get to the success part before the destruction caught up with him. His YouTube subscriber count crossed 130,000. He was getting coverage from legitimate hip-hop outlets. The foundation for a real career was actually there. But here's the thing that the streams and the subscriber counts don't tell you. Every single one of those projects was being built while Bway was navigating a second-degree murder charge. Let's go back to December 2nd, 2019. Bway is 16 years old. A 17-year-old named Javon Brown is walking home from school in East Baton Rouge Parish. He's with a friend. According to reports, the two of them were approached by 3 men. A dispute broke out and Javon was shot in the stomach. He was rushed to a hospital but did not survive.
Authorities say the 17-year-old was shot in the stomach Monday on his way home from school and later died from his injuries.
Police began investigating, and within a short period, Bway Youngie and his older brother Devon Tate, another half-sibling in the Tate family, and were both taken into custody, both charged with second-degree murder and illegal use of a weapon.
Jeffrey is wanted for principal to second-degree murder, principal to illegal use of a weapon, and simple battery.
Second-degree murder at 16. In the middle of December 2019, months before he would ever release his first song publicly. And when this kid walked into that courtroom, the lawyer sitting next to him was not someone his multi-millionaire brother hired. It was a public defender, a court-appointed attorney provided by the state because the defendant couldn't afford private counsel. Now let's sit with that for a moment, because people throw around the word public defender like it's just a neutral fact, but it carries enormous practical implications. Louisiana's public defender system is chronically underfunded and overwhelmed. Public defenders in the state routinely handle caseloads that make it nearly impossible to give each client the individualized attention a serious charge demands. They often lack the investigators, the expert witnesses, and the pretrial motion support that well-funded private defense teams deploy as standard practice. On a second-degree murder charge, which in Louisiana can carry a sentence of life without parole, the difference in representation quality is not a minor detail, it can be everything. Now consider what NBA Youngboy's legal situation looked like during the same general period. When Youngboy got arrested on federal gun charges in 2021, he posted a $1.5 million bond. He had attorneys fighting for him at every stage. When he was hit with 63 alleged charges in Utah in 2024, charges the affidavit described as relating to a large-scale prescription fraud ring. He again had serious legal resources in his corner. He navigated that entire ordeal from outside of a cell, eventually receiving a presidential pardon from Donald Trump in early 2026. That's the legal reality for the brother with money. Now contrast that with the legal reality of the 16-year-old sitting in a Baton Rouge courtroom with a public defender while that same brother said nothing publicly about it. To be clear about what happened legally, the prosecutors were ultimately unable to build the case against Bway strongly enough to secure a conviction on the murder charge. He was not found guilty. He walked out the other side. But here is something people overlook when they talk about a case being dismissed or charges not sticking. The process itself is a punishment. You are in the system. Your name is attached to a murder charge in public records. Your freedom is restricted while the case plays out. Your ability to focus on building anything else, a music career, a legal income stream, any forward momentum, is severely compromised while you're spending time, energy, and every available resource managing a legal situation that could put you away for life. Bway was doing all of that at 16 and 17 years old with whatever support a court-appointed attorney could provide. And then in July 2020, while the murder case is still active, Bway gets shot. He's in East Baton Rouge, the same area where the December 2019 shooting happened, and he takes gunshot wounds. He ends up in a local hospital, described as being in stable condition. Rumors circulating at the time pointed to this being retaliation connected to the earlier incident. So now we're looking at a 17-year-old who is simultaneously a shooting victim and a murder suspect, still physically in the same neighborhood where all of this is happening, with no visible safety net and no famous older brother showing up to change the equation. There are people reading the comments of videos like this who are already typing out, "You don't know what happens privately," and "maybe he helps behind the scenes." That's a reasonable pushback. Private generosity doesn't always make the news. We genuinely cannot account for every dollar or every phone call that never became public. What we can account for is outcomes, and the outcome, publicly visible and documented, is that Bway was in those streets catching bullets and sitting in courtrooms with free lawyers while his brother had every resource to make a different situation happen. If there was significant private intervention, the evidence of its effect on Bway's circumstances is not showing up in the results. Now let's talk about what Youngboy's generosity actually looks like in practice, because this is an important piece of the puzzle. His 4KT movement has been well documented. He has bought cars for people in his circle. He has funded recording sessions. He has given platform to artists who came up around him. He has shown genuine loyalty to the people he chose to put around him. Nobody is questioning whether Youngboy is capable of generosity. The record clearly shows he is. What the record also shows is that the generosity has been flowing toward the people in his chosen circle, the people who add something to the Youngboy ecosystem in some functional way, and not visibly toward the brother who shares his father's blood and is still stuck in the same environment Kentrell got out of. That distinction matters because it says something about the nature of the relationship, whether we want to sit with that or not. Bway kept making music through all of this. That part deserves real respect. Most people would have folded under that kind of pressure. Murder charges, a shooting, the weight of a legal situation that could end everything, all of it happening before you're old enough to legally drink. But Bway stayed in the studio, kept putting out content, kept building his subscriber count and his streaming numbers with whatever was available to him. In 2024, he dropped Been Too Sad, and that title is not accidental. That is a man communicating something real through his music. He also released Old Days, a song that clearly reflects on where he came from and who he used to be. How Dat Go, Check Me Out, Bangin' and Swangin', all of these came out in 2024, showing that he was not content to be defined by his circumstances alone. He was trying to build something despite them. And then in 2025, he released an EP called Where is Bway and another single, He Back Now, signaling that even after the latest arrest, he was still trying to make the music work. The problem was structural. Building a rap career without management, without a label infrastructure, without legal funds that could protect you from the constant interruptions that street life brings. That is climbing a mountain with one hand tied behind your back. Bway had the talent. He clearly had the work ethic. What he didn't have was the machine that turns all of that raw material into something sustainable. And the person who had the most obvious access to that machine, who had built it himself from scratch, who understood better than anyone what Bway needed because he had come from the exact same world, that person never plugged his brother in. April 30th, 2025. Bway is 22 years old, a few months from turning 23. Arlington, Texas. The Arlington Police Department picks him up. Jeffrey Tate is booked at the Tarrant County Correction Center on charges of illegal possession of a firearm and possession of marijuana. The arrest report also notes he is being held as a fugitive by another agency. It's another news cycle about another arrest. And NBA Youngboy, who had just come through his own extraordinary legal saga, 63 charges, federal court, house arrest, and ultimately a presidential pardon, responded to his brother's arrest with complete public silence. No comment, no post, nothing. And this happened while the rest of the family was also catching cases. Brother Devon already had his legal history from 2019. NBA Ken, another Tate sibling, got arrested in December 2024 during a Texas traffic stop with an unlicensed firearm and 3 pythons in the car. 3 pythons. Multiple brothers in this family cycling through the legal system, each of them navigating it without the kind of resources their famous brother sits on. That pattern is hard to look away from once you see it. Now let's talk about the hood vlog footage that made its rounds online, because this is the visual evidence that brought a lot of new attention to Bway's situation. The footage showed Bway Youngie out in the streets, not in a controlled environment, not on a video shoot with a security perimeter, but genuinely out there in the trenches of Baton Rouge, just living, posting up in the neighborhood, and people who understand that city immediately recognized what they were seeing. This was not a curated street aesthetic for content purposes. This was a young man's actual daily reality, and that reality involved being physically present in one of the most dangerous environments in the country with no visible protective infrastructure around him whatsoever. Here is why that footage matters beyond just the optics. When your older brother is one of the most recognizable names in hip-hop culture, you are not an anonymous person in those streets. You are known. People know your brother's music, his beefs, his legal history, his enemies. And some of those people will transfer whatever feelings they have about Youngboy onto you, because you are accessible in a way that Youngboy himself is not. You are the version of the famous brother that the hood can actually reach. That dynamic does not make you safer. It makes you a more attractive target. Having no security around you in that context is not just a lifestyle choice. It's a genuine, ongoing risk to your physical safety. And the person with the resources to change that calculus has done nothing publicly visible to change it. Think about what security actually costs at the level Youngboy operates. He could fund a full security detail for his little brother for an entire year on what amounts to pocket change relative to his income streams. We are not talking about some impossible ask. We are talking about a line item that rappers far less successful than Youngboy pay for extended family members without blinking. The fact that Bway is out here in those vlogs with no buffer, no protection, no visible sign that his famous brother's resources are touching his daily life in any meaningful way, that is a choice. Maybe not a conscious, deliberate one, but a choice by omission is still a choice. Youngboy has built his entire brand on a specific set of values. Never Broke Again is not just a name you slap on a logo. It's a statement about identity, about loyalty, about what you owe to the people who were in the trenches with you before the money showed up. His music comes back to these themes over and over. The idea that real ones don't forget where they came from, that the code demands you look out for your people when you have the ability to do so. That's the worldview that made his fan base believe in him so deeply. They connected with the idea of a man who was going to carry his people with him when he rose. And maybe for some people in his circle, that promise was kept. But for the brother who shares his blood, who was shaped by the same city, the same absent father, the same generational poverty, the evidence points to a very different reality. And look, this is not about judging Youngboy as a person in totality. This is one dimension of a complicated human being who has done extraordinary things against extraordinary odds. The man broke records. He became a father 13 times. He survived situations that should have ended his career multiple times over. That's real. But it is also real that his brother is 23 years old and still navigating the streets without the safety net that Youngboy's success could have provided. It is real that Bway went through a second-degree murder case with a public defender while his brother was posting million-dollar bonds. It is real that every time Youngboy's little brother caught a new charge or found himself in another dangerous situation, the silence from Youngboy's camp was complete. Both of those things can be true simultaneously. What haunts this story more than anything else is how close a different outcome was. Bway had the talent. Listen to his music without knowing who his brother is and you hear a legitimate artist. The bars are there. The storytelling is there. The emotional authenticity is absolutely there. You cannot fake that kind of pain in your voice, and Bway never had to. He was rapping his real life. He was doing exactly what Youngboy did, which was take the hardest parts of his existence and turn them into music that people could feel. The title, Success Before Destruction, wasn't just an album name, it was a prayer. A kid actively aware that the window was narrowing, trying to get to the success before the destruction arrived to cancel it. That level of self-awareness, that understanding of your own precarious position, deserves more than to be a footnote in somebody else's success story. The only meaningful difference between Bway's career path and Youngboy's is that Youngboy had his breakthrough moment arrive before the streets could fully close the door. Bway never got that moment. Every time something started to move, a project gaining traction, a song connecting, momentum starting to build, something from the legal system or the streets would interrupt it and reset the clock. That's what institutional support could have changed. Not a handout, not someone carrying him. Bway clearly was never waiting to be carried, but proper management, a legal defense fund for when the inevitable happened, a relocation package that put physical distance between him and the environment that kept pulling him back, the kind of cosign from his famous brother that would have made labels take him seriously instead of treating him like an interesting footnote in a bigger story, the kind of cosign that cost a millionaire very little but could have meant everything to someone trying to make it from the same ground floor. None of that required Youngboy to sacrifice anything meaningful from his own position. It was the kind of assist that changes a trajectory without disrupting yours. Instead, silence. Instead, distance. Instead, the same block, the same charges, the same outcome for a kid who deserved a different one. Bway Youngie is 23 years old. He has 4 albums in the catalog. He has survived a gunshot. He has beaten a murder charge. He released an EP in 2025 called Where is Bway? And honestly, that title asks the exact right question. Because where he is still in the trenches, still grinding without a foundation under him, still building in a way that requires him to be in environments that represent real, documented danger for someone in his position. He kept going when most people would have stopped. That resilience is real and it matters. But resilience is not a substitute for resources. And what Bway has needed for years is not more strength on his end. He has plenty of that. What he needed was for the door to open from the other side, from someone who had the key and the ability to turn it. That door has stayed closed. And as long as it does, Bway's story stays exactly where it's been since the beginning. 2 steps from a different life and stuck. The deeper tragedy in all of this is what it says about how success actually works in the culture we've built around hip-hop. We celebrate the come-up. We celebrate the moment a rapper from nothing makes it to something. We build mythology around the grind, the pain, the survival story. But we don't always talk about who gets left behind in the slipstream of that success. We don't always talk about the brothers and the cousins and the childhood friends who didn't have the specific gift or the specific timing or the specific break that turned one person's story into a headline while everyone else's stayed a footnote. Bway's situation is not unique. There are versions of this playing out in every city that has produced a famous rapper, but because it involves one of the biggest names in the game, it forces the conversation out into the open in a way that cannot be ignored. It forces you to ask whether Never Broke Again was ever really meant to include everyone who shared the blood, or just the people who could be useful to the brand. That's the story of Bway Youngie, and it is a whole lot sadder than it ever had to be. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think. Should Youngboy be doing more for his brother, or is this on Bway to figure out himself?